There is a clay tablet in the British Museum, catalogued under a number so bureaucratic that nobody remembers it, that contains a sentence most translators quietly refuse to translate directly. The tablet is Sumerian. It is older than the Book of Genesis by roughly 2,000 years. It was found in what used to be the city of Nippur, in a temple library that was buried under the mud of the Euphrates for 4,000 years, and only pulled out of the ground in the 1800s. And the sentence on it says, when you strip away the academic hedging and just read what the cuneiform actually says, that there are 11 things a human being can do that no God can do, that no God has ever done, and that no God will ever be able to do. You have not heard this before. Not because it is a secret, exactly, but because the mainstream translations of the Sumerian corpus soften it. They call it a poetic exaggeration. They call it a scribal boast. They call it the kind of thing you write when you want to comfort a dying king. But the ancient astronaut researchers who spent the last 40 years reading these tablets against the grain, cross-referencing them with the Atrahasis epic, with the Enuma Elish, with the 12 tablets of Gilgamesh, with the King List, with the Descent of Inanna, and with the fragments of the Barton cylinder that nobody at the university wants to talk about at faculty parties, they came away with a very different reading. They came away thinking that the sentence is not poetic at all, that it is a diagnostic, that the Sumerian scribes were doing something more precise than praise. They were listing, in inventory form, the abilities that the beings who came down and built the first cities did not have, and that the beings the Anunnaki built to serve them turned out to have anyway. 11 abilities, 11 acts, 11 things you can do, right now, sitting there, watching this, that the sky beings who, according to these tablets, shaped the human template out of clay and blood and their own genetic material, cannot do. Not could not, back then. Cannot, present tense. The tablets are consistent on this. Whatever the Anunnaki were, whatever the Igigi that rebelled and dumped their labor onto the human race were, whatever the 7 judges of the underworld were, they were missing something. Something that the humans they made ended up having by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Some readings of the Enki and Ninmah tablets suggest that Enki, the god of freshwater and cunning, put these 11 things into the human template on purpose, because he knew what was going to happen. He knew the gods would need a species that could do the 11 things they couldn't. This video is going to walk you through all of them, in order, with the tablet references, the passages, the translations that got softened, and the passages that got left out of the popular editions of these texts entirely. Some of them will sound obvious once you hear them, and then you will realize you have never thought about the fact that a god cannot do them. Some of them will sound impossible, and then you will realize you do them every week. One of them, the 11th, is the one the Sumerians thought was the most important, and it is the one that got translated most poorly in the modern editions. And when you hear what the tablet actually says, you will understand why the beings who supposedly came down from the sky and taught us farming and irrigation and writing and mathematics ended up leaving the planet, or ended up not leaving the planet. That part is contested. What is not contested is what they left behind. A list. 11 items. The things that we can do, and they cannot. Quick pause, and this is something new. For the first time since the 12 codes, there's a second document. It's called the 7 resets every time the world was erased, matched against the 11 tablet acts, and the checklist of signs for the 8th 4 are already active. Linked below, QR code on screen. That's all back to the video. Before we get to the first one, you need to understand where these tablets sit in the archaeology, because the whole framing depends on it. The Sumerian tablets we are talking about were not written yesterday. The oldest of them, the archaic tablets from Uruk and Jemdet Nasr, go back to roughly 3,200 years before the Common Era. The later ones, the Neo-Sumerian and the Old Babylonian copies of the Sumerian originals, run through the 2nd millennium before the Common Era and even into the 1st millennium in Akkadian translation. The 12 tablets of Gilgamesh, in the standard version that most people quote, are Akkadian, but they are based on Sumerian originals that are several centuries older, and those Sumerian originals are themselves based on oral traditions that Assyriologists estimate could go back another 1,000 years or more. The Atrahasis epic, which is the closest thing we have to a Sumerian creation and flood narrative, exists in an old Babylonian recension from the 17th century before the Common Era, and it references the earlier Sumerian myth cycles that gave us the framework of the Anunnaki, the Igigi, the Skyfather An, the storm god Enlil, the freshwater god Enki, the birth goddess Ninhursag, and the 7 judges of the underworld. All of these documents, taken together, form a corpus, and within that corpus, the 11 acts appear, not always as a numbered list. sometimes as scattered lines across different tablets, sometimes as a coherent inventory. But they are there, and once you know what to look for, you cannot unsee them. The first act is the one that sits at the center of the Gilgamesh epic, and it is the one that gives the whole list its foundation. Because if the first act were not true, none of the others would matter. The first act is the one that the goddess Siduri, keeper of the tavern at the edge of the world, tells Gilgamesh about when he comes to her half-starved and grief-mad after the death of his friend Enkidu. The passage is on Tablet 10 of the Standard Babylonian edition, and it is one of the most quoted passages in all of Mesopotamian literature. Siduri says to Gilgamesh, in the translation that got softened, something to the effect of go home, eat, be merry, dance, have children, love your wife, because life is short. What she actually says, in a more literal reading of the Akkadian, is that when the gods made humanity, they kept life for themselves and gave death to the humans as a gift. As a gift, that is the word. And this is where the ancient astronaut readers stop and stare, because in every ordinary theology, death is a curse. Death is what happens to you when you screw up. Death is the punishment for eating the fruit, for opening the box, for looking back at the burning city. Death is what the gods use to keep you in line. But in the Sumerian tablets, death is the first item on the list. The first thing you can do that the gods cannot, and the tablet is very clear about this. It is not that the gods choose not to die. It is that they cannot. The first ability humans have that no god has, according to the Sumerian corpus, is the ability to die. Now stop and think about what that actually means. Because we treat mortality like a defect. We treat it like the thing that makes us less than the gods, less than the immortals, less than whatever cosmic beings we imagine looking down at us and pitying our short flicker of consciousness. But the Sumerians were not doing that. The Sumerians were looking at their gods, or at the beings they called gods, the beings that came down and taught them how to plant barley and how to build ziggurats and how to write cuneiform on wet clay with a reed stylus, and they were noticing that those beings never died. And they were noticing that this was not, from the gods' point of view, a great deal. In the Atrahasis epic, the Igigi, the lower rank of the sky beings, revolt against the higher gods because they have been working forever, digging the rivers and the canals for the higher gods. And they are exhausted, and they cannot rest, because rest is a form of ending, and they cannot end. They burn their tools, they march on the house of Enlil, they demand that something be done, and what is done in the tablet is that Enki and Ninmah are ordered to create a new being, a Lulu, a mixed one, whose purpose is to take over the labor of the Igigi, and the being they create, from the clay of the earth and the blood of a slain god, is the human being. And the reason the being works, the reason the being is capable of doing the labor that the Igigi could not sustain, is that the being can end. The being can stop, the being wears out, the being sleeps. And eventually, the being sleeps in a way that does not end. And this, in the tablet, is presented not as a defect, it is presented as a solution. The gods could not die. This was their central problem. They existed on a timescale that made their labor unbearable. Every task they took on, they had to complete. And then they had to keep existing forever afterward, remembering it, carrying it, watching the results of it play out across ages. They could not put anything down. They could not close any chapter. When Enlil grew tired of the noise of humans in the Atrahasis epic, he could not simply die and let a new god take his place. He had to send the flood. He had to try to reset the world. And even when the flood came and the world was wiped, Enlil was still there, immortal, still stuck with the same personality, the same weariness, the same rage. The tablet describes him afterward as bitter, not chastened, not humbled, bitter, because he could not do the thing that would have solved his problem, which was to stop being Enlil. He could not die into someone new. Humans could. Humans still can. Right now, sitting there, watching this video, you have inside you a capacity that no cosmic being in the Sumerian pantheon possessed. You have an ending. You have a horizon that closes. You have a last day. And that last day is not, in the Sumerian view, a punishment. It is a release. It is the thing that lets you do everything else on this list. Because a being who cannot end, cannot start over, cannot become new, cannot let go of what it has been. You can. You do it every night in sleep, in miniature, and you will do it once at the end in full. And the tablets, when you read them carefully, treat this as the foundation of everything else that follows. Because a being that can die can also grieve, and hope, and love, and change, and do the other 10 things on the list. A being that cannot die is locked into itself forever, And the Sumerian tablets are not shy about how they describe such beings. They describe them as trapped. There is a passage in the Descent of Inanna, one of the older Sumerian narratives, that makes this point in a way that is almost unbearable to read once you understand it. Inanna, the queen of heaven, descends into the underworld to visit her sister Ereshkigal. And in the underworld, Inanna is stripped of her regalia at each of the 7 gates. Her crown, her lapis lazuli beads, her breastplate, her measuring rod, her golden ring, her chest ornament, and finally her royal robe. She arrives before Ereshkigal naked and bowed. And Ereshkigal, upon seeing her, fixes her with the eye of death, and Inanna dies. She becomes a corpse. She is hung on a hook on the wall of the underworld, and the tablets describe her, in her dead state, as a piece of rotting meat. And the crucial thing about this passage is what happens next, because Inanna is a goddess, and a goddess cannot die. Not really. Not permanently. Enki, in the tablet, hears that Inanna is missing, and he sends 2 creatures, the Kurgara and the Galatur, to the underworld to fetch her back. They sprinkle her with the water of life and the food of life, and she rises again. And she returns to the world, and she is exactly the same as she was before. She has not changed, she has not aged, she has not learned anything from her death. Because it was not a death, it was a costume change. Compare this to Enkidu. Enkidu, in the Gilgamesh epic, is a wild man who becomes civilized, who befriends Gilgamesh, who fights the bull of heaven, who insults Ishtar, and who is condemned to die for it. And when Enkidu dies, on Tablet 7, he really dies. He describes his death in advance, in a dream, and the dream is one of the most harrowing passages in all of ancient literature. He sees a being with a lion's face come to take him. He sees his hands turn into wings. He sees himself descend into a house of dust, where the dead sit forever, eating clay, wearing garments of feathers, ruled by Ereshkigal. And when he wakes, he lingers for 12 days, and then he dies, and he does not come back. And Gilgamesh, for the rest of the epic, cannot get over it. He becomes obsessed. He wanders. He looks for immortality. He finds Utnapishtim, the flood survivor. And Utnapishtim tells him the same thing Siduri told him, which is go home, life is short, the gods kept immortality for themselves. And Gilgamesh, on the last tablet, returns to the walls of his city and looks at them and understands. And the epic ends. It ends with a man who has accepted his mortality. And the acceptance is presented, in the tablet, as a form of wisdom that no god ever attains, because no god ever has to. The tablet is explicit about this. In the 11th tablet of Gilgamesh, when Utnapishtim finishes telling his story of the flood, he offers Gilgamesh a test. Stay awake for 7 days and 7 nights, and I will consider granting you immortality. And Gilgamesh, exhausted from his journey, sits down and immediately falls asleep. He sleeps for a full week. And when Utnapishtim wakes him, Gilgamesh does not know that he has slept. He insists he was awake. And Utnapishtim, in a gesture that is almost pitying, points to 7 loaves of bread that his wife has baked, 1 for each day, and shows how the first is dry as dust, the second is old, the third is soggy, the fourth is white with mold, and so on down to the 7th, which is fresh from the oven. And Gilgamesh sees the time that has passed on his body without his knowledge, and he understands, and he weeps. And the passage ends with a line that most translators render as a lament, but which reads more accurately as a diagnosis. Where can I go, Gilgamesh says, that death will not follow me? And Utnapishtim says nowhere. It is inside you. It is the thing that makes you what you are. That last phrase is the key. It is the thing that makes you what you are. In the Sumerian and Akkadian understanding, death is not something that happens to a human at the end. It is something the human carries, from birth, as a defining feature. And the gods do not carry it. And this is not a superiority. This is a lack. The gods lack the thing that lets a human be a human. The tablets, particularly the fragments of the Adapa myth, take this even further. Adapa, a human sage of the antediluvian period, one of the 7 Apkallu, the 7 wise men who were half fish and half human and who taught the arts of civilization to the earliest cities, is offered immortality by the god Anu. Adapa is brought before Anu after breaking the wing of the south wind, and Anu offers him the food of life and the water of life, and Adapa refuses. He has been warned by Enki, his patron god, that Anu is going to offer him the food of death disguised as the food of life, and Enki has told him to refuse. But Enki, it turns out, was lying. or was telling a half-truth. The food Anu offers is the food of life, and Adapa, by refusing it, loses his chance at immortality forever. And Enki, when Adapa returns, does not apologize. Enki explains, and the tablet is fragmentary here, but the meaning is clear, that immortality is not what Adapa wants, that the 7 Apkallu who have it are trapped in a way Adapa cannot yet understand. That Adapa is more useful, more human, more valuable to the plan, if he remains mortal. And Adapa is allowed to return to the city of Eridu, where he becomes the sage of the temple, and where he dies, eventually, as a human dies. And his name is remembered. There is a version of the myth in which Adapa understands what Enki did and forgives him. In another version, Adapa never speaks to Enki again. Both versions survive. The tablets do not agree on the ending, but they agree on the point. The point is that mortality is not a curse that the gods placed on humans. The point is that mortality is a feature the gods do not have, that humans do have, and that the entire architecture of human meaning is built around the fact that we can end. When you love someone, you love them because they will end. When you build something, you build it because you will end. When you make a choice, you make it because your choices are finite, and each one closes off the others. The gods, in the Sumerian understanding, have infinite time. Every choice they make is provisional. Every love they have can be renegotiated. Every project they start can be abandoned and started again. Nothing has weight. Nothing has cost. Nothing means anything in the way that things mean something for a being that can end. And this is why the first ability on the list is the ability to die. Not because dying is desirable, not because we should welcome it, but because the fact of it, the reality of it, the pressure of it, against every moment of a human life, is what makes the other 10 abilities possible. Without an ending, you cannot really love. You cannot really grieve. You cannot really choose. You cannot really change. You cannot really hope. All of the abilities that follow, all 10 of them, are downstream of the first. They are consequences of the fact that a human has a horizon, and the gods, the Anunnaki and the Agigi and whatever other beings the Sumerian scribes were describing when they wrote down these tablets, do not have a horizon. They have an endless present, an endless past, an endless future, and no way to tell which is which, and no way to feel that any of it matters. The Sumerian priests, when they wrote about the gods, did not write about them as happy. Read the hymns, read the laments, read the letters that priests wrote to their gods asking for favors. The gods are described as weary, distant, distracted, angry, sometimes generous but often absent, and above all, uninterested in the small details of human life. Because the small details of human life happen at a scale the gods can barely perceive. A human life, to a Sumerian god, is a flicker, a conversation, a marriage, a child, a career, all compressed into a single blink of divine attention. And the priests, when they wrote about this, did not envy the gods. They pitied them, in a way that they were careful not to say out loud, because to pity a god is a form of blasphemy, but the pity leaks through in the tablets. It leaks through in the way Siduri talks to Gilgamesh. It leaks through in the way Utnapishtim, who has been given the god's gift of immortality, describes his own condition. Utnapishtim, remember, is not a god. He is a human who was granted immortality after the flood. And in the tablet, he lives with his wife at the mouth of the rivers, far away from other humans, in a kind of quiet exile. He is not shown as triumphant. He is shown as removed. He no longer has to face the ending, and so he no longer has anything urgent to do. He has become, in a sense, less than he was, because the ending was the thing that made his life sharp. There is a Sumerian proverb, preserved on a school tablet from the 2nd millennium before the Common Era, that goes something like this. The one who has a beginning and an ending has a middle worth having. The one who has neither has nothing at all. This proverb was copied by student scribes as a writing exercise, which means it was considered basic wisdom, the kind of thing a Sumerian child needed to know before moving on to more advanced texts. And it is a distillation of the entire first item on our list. The middle is worth having because it is a middle, because it is bracketed, because it has to end. And the gods, having no ending, have no middle, have no shape, have no story. They have only continuation. You have a story, right now. The story is happening. It started at your birth, it will end at your death, and everything you do between now and then is inside the story. Nothing you do can be undone by an infinite tomorrow, because you do not have an infinite tomorrow. You have a finite one, and then another, and then some number of them, and then no more. And this fact, this brutal and beautiful fact, is the first thing you can do that the gods in the Sumerian tablets cannot. You can end, and in ending, you can matter. There is one more layer to this that the tablets add, and it is the layer that the ancient astronaut theorists find most provocative. In the Enki and Ninmah tablet, when the two gods are creating human beings in the Abzu, the fresh water deep beneath the earth, they are drinking. They are getting drunk, actually. The tablet is very clear about this. And as they get drunk, they start experimenting. They start making defective humans. A human with weak eyes. A human who cannot control its urine. A human with no arms. A human who cannot bear children. And Enki, each time Ninmah makes a defective human, finds a role for that human in society, a destiny, a place. The weak-eyed one becomes a temple singer. The one who cannot control its urine becomes a favored companion of the king. The armless one becomes an oracle. And this continues for a while, and it is one of the strangest passages in Sumerian literature. And then, at the end of the sequence, Enki himself creates a being called Yu-Mu-Ul, a being that is old from the moment of its birth, a being that trembles, cannot chew, cannot walk, cannot see clearly, cannot hear. And Enki asks Ninmah to find a destiny for this one, and Ninmah cannot. She tries. She fails. And in the failure, the tablet suggests something is revealed about the difference between the gods and the humans, because the humans, even the defective ones, all had a destiny that could be assigned. But the being that was already at the end, the being whose entire condition was the condition of ending, the being who was, in effect, a walking metaphor for mortality itself, could not be given a role. And Ninmah, at the end of the passage, weeps. She weeps because she has seen what mortality actually is. Not a feature, not a lack, a gift. And the gift is what she cannot give. This is the first thing you can do that no god can, according to the Sumerian tablets. You can die. And in dying, you can be. And in being, you can matter. And no god, in the entire pantheon of the ancient Near East, has ever mattered in the way a single human being can matter for the span of a single afternoon. That is not a poetic exaggeration. That is what the tablets say. The second thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is forget. This one is going to sound absurd at first, because forgetting is, in most cultures, considered a weakness. We prize memory. We build monuments to make sure we do not forget. We write things down. We take photographs. We tattoo names on our skin. We tell our children the family stories so that the stories will survive us. Forgetting, in the modern imagination, is something that happens to us against our will. It is the enemy. It is what dementia does. It is what trauma does when it hides itself. It is what happens to a name we should have remembered at a party. Forgetting, we think, is loss. The Sumerians did not think that. Or rather, the Sumerians thought that too. But they also thought something else. And the something else is the second item on the list. The Sumerians, when they wrote about the gods, described the gods as beings who remembered everything, every slight, every promise, every offering that was not made, every insult, going back to the first day of creation. Enlil, in the Atrahasis epic, sends the flood in part because he cannot forget how noisy the humans have been. The noise has accumulated. Each generation of humans has added to it. And Enlil has been listening, without break, without respite, without any capacity to let any of it fade. Every scream, every argument, every clatter of pots in every kitchen in every city on the plain, all of it is stored in him. And it drives him to rage. The tablet does not use the word rage. The tablet uses a word that translates more like unbearable pressure. Because for a god, the accumulation of unforgotten experience is a pressure. It builds. It has nowhere to go. It cannot be metabolized, because metabolism is a process of endings and forgettings, and the god has neither. There is a passage in the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, that draws on and reworks the older Sumerian material, in which the primordial waters, Apsu and Tiamat, are disturbed by the noise of their descendants, the younger gods. And Apsu, the god of fresh water, decides to kill his own children to have quiet. Tiamat, the god of salt water, refuses, and Apsu is eventually killed by Ea, which is the Akkadian name for Enki. And the whole conflict starts because a god cannot tune anything out. A god cannot let the noise become background. A god hears everything, always, at the same volume, from every source, forever. And this is not a poetic detail. This is a technical description of what it means to be a being with perfect memory and infinite attention. The Sumerian scribes, when they wrote this, were describing something they had observed. They had observed that the beings they called gods did not forget, and they had concluded, from watching those beings suffer under the weight of never forgetting, that forgetting is a mercy. That forgetting is a form of grace. That forgetting is, in fact, one of the abilities that makes human life possible. Consider what your day would be like if you could not forget. Not just the big things, the small things. The face of every stranger you passed on the street yesterday, the exact wording of every text message you have ever received, every song you have ever heard, playing simultaneously in your mind, at the volume at which you first heard it, forever. Every embarrassment, every regret, every meal you have ever eaten, remembered in full sensory detail, all at once. You would go mad in an hour. And this is what the Sumerians thought the gods were experiencing, constantly. Not madness, exactly, because the gods had the strength to endure it, but something like a permanent low-grade fever of consciousness, a permanent state of being crowded. Enlil sends the flood not because humans have offended him in a specific way. Enlil sends the flood because he has accumulated too much, because his interior is too full, because he cannot make more room by forgetting some of what is in there. And the tablet, in describing the aftermath of the flood, has one of the most extraordinary lines in the whole corpus. After the flood recedes, and Utnapishtim comes out of the boat and makes a sacrifice, the gods come down and gather around the sacrifice like flies. That is the word the tablet uses, like flies, because they are starving. They have not been fed offerings in the days of the flood, and they realize in that moment that they need the humans. They need the offerings. They need the noise, the buzz, the constant hum of human worship, because it is the only thing that distracts them from the accumulated weight of their own perfect memory. Without the humans, the gods have only themselves to listen to, and they cannot bear it. Ishtar, in the tablet, weeps and swears never to allow such a thing to happen again, not because she loves humans, particularly, but because without the humans, the gods have to face themselves, and they cannot. The second item on the list is forgetting. And forgetting, in the Sumerian understanding, is not the failure of memory. It is a separate faculty. It is the capacity to let something go, to close a chapter, to have an experience and then to move past the experience so that the next experience can arrive without competition. A human being who has fallen in love and then had that love end can eventually forget enough of it to fall in love again. A human being who has failed at something can forget enough of the failure to try again. A human being who has lost a parent can, over years, forget enough of the pain to laugh again. Forgetting is not the erasure of the past. It is the softening of the past. It is what makes the past into background instead of foreground. And the gods, in the tablets, have no background. Everything is foreground. Everything is now. There is a Sumerian hymn to the god Nana, the moon god, that describes Nana as the one who watches over the sleeping city. And the hymn dwells on the sleep of the humans, in a way that seems, at first, decorative. Nana is described as looking down at each house, and inside each house, at the sleeping bodies of the humans, and at the way their eyes flutter, and at the way their breath rises and falls. And the hymn describes Nana as envious. Envious of what? Envious of sleep. Because Nana does not sleep, the moon does not close its eye, and in sleep, the hymn says, the humans do something the gods cannot do. They forget. They put down the day. They reset. And in the morning, they get up, and the previous day is a little softer, a little farther away, a little less pressing. The god does not have this reset. The god carries yesterday into today at the full weight of yesterday. And this is why, in the hymn, the god is described as watching the humans with something like longing. The Sumerian tablets have several passages that make this same point in different ways. In the descent of Inanna, when Inanna returns from the underworld, she has to choose a substitute to take her place among the dead. She wanders through the cities of the plain looking for someone to send. And in the cities, she finds people who are mourning her, who are wearing sackcloth, who are covered in ashes, who are grieving her death. And she cannot bring herself to send any of them because they are grieving her, and their grief is fresh, and their grief is a form of love. And then she comes to her own house in Uruk, and she finds her husband Dumuzi, who is not grieving. He is sitting on his throne. He is wearing his best clothes. He has been feasting. And the tablet does not say whether Dumuzi had actually forgotten Inanna, or whether he had simply moved on with his life while she was gone, or whether he was quietly grieving in a way that did not show. What the tablet says is that Inanna, seeing him not visibly mourning her, becomes enraged, and she sends him to the underworld in her place. And Dumuzi, in the tablet, weeps and pleads, and his sister Geshtinana offers to take his place for half the year. And the arrangement is made. Dumuzi goes to the underworld for half the year, and Geshtinana for the other half. And this is the mythological origin of the seasons, and of the dying and rising god who returns each spring. But underneath the myth, in the way the tablet is constructed, there is a subtle point about forgetting. Inanna cannot forgive Dumuzi for what appears to be forgetting her, because Inanna, as a goddess, does not forget, and she cannot understand what forgetting is for. She sees Dumuzi's apparent forgetfulness as betrayal. But the tablet, in the way it lingers on the scene, suggests that Dumuzi's apparent forgetting is not betrayal at all. It is the human capacity to keep living. It is the human capacity to have someone die, and to still, on the morning after, get out of bed and eat something and put on clothes and continue. This capacity is not a failure of love. It is a feature of being a mortal creature who has to keep going even when the mortal creatures around you have stopped. Dumuzi, in this reading, is the more human of the two figures, and Inanna, the goddess, punishes him for it, because she cannot understand it. Because to a being who does not forget, any degree of moving on looks like abandonment. The ancient astronaut readers have taken this passage and run with it in a specific direction. They argue that the Anunnaki, the beings who came down from the sky and taught the Sumerians to build cities, brought with them a way of experiencing time that was fundamentally incompatible with the way humans experience time. The Anunnaki, in this reading, remembered everything with perfect clarity. Every command they gave, every act they took, every offense they suffered. And when they interacted with humans, they became frustrated, over and over, at the human tendency to forget. A human king would be given a divine instruction, and the king would obey for a while, and then, 3 generations later, the king's descendants would have forgotten the instruction and would have to be given it again. And the Anunnaki, in this reading, spent much of their time in the ancient world simply reminding humans of things the humans kept forgetting, and they were exhausted by it, and they eventually left. There is a passage in one of the fragmentary Enki tablets that describes Enki, at the end of his active reign over the humans, as tired. And the reason he gives, in the passage, is that the humans keep forgetting that every generation of humans has to be taught the same things: farming, writing, the proper offerings, the correct order of the temple rituals. And Enki says, in the fragment, that he does not understand how a species can be so productive when it cannot retain its own knowledge. And he says, also, that he almost envies the humans, because for them, every day is new. For him, every day is the same day. He has been through this exact conversation with this exact type of king 1,000 times, and the 1,001st time still feels, to the king, like a discovery. This is the second item on the list: forgetting. And it is not the failure of memory. It is the capacity to close experiences off from the present, to let them fade, to let them soften. It is what makes recovery possible. It is what makes forgiveness possible. It is what makes joy possible after grief, and love possible after loss, and hope possible after defeat. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, have none of it. They remember every offense. They remember every debt. They remember every promise that was made and every promise that was broken. And they carry it all forever. And you, sitting there watching this, are able to close your eyes right now and let some of what happened to you today drift into the background, and go to sleep tonight, and wake up tomorrow, and today will be a little smaller. That is the second thing you can do that no god can. You can let the day end inside you and start a new one. And the gods can only ever have one day, and that day is all of them, all at once, forever. There is one more layer to this, and it comes from the tablets that describe the underworld. Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld, is described in one of the Sumerian laments as the one who remembers what everyone else has forgotten. She keeps the accounts. She holds the record of every death and every debt, and when the dead come to her house, they are stripped of their memories in a specific way. They are made to drink the water of forgetting, and this is not, in the tablet, a punishment. It is a mercy. Because to enter the underworld carrying the full memory of your life would be unbearable. Ereshkigal takes the memory from the dead and puts it in her records, and the dead themselves are allowed to forget. This is presented, in the tablet, as one of the kindest acts in the pantheon, because Ereshkigal understands what memory does when it cannot be released, and she gives the dead what she herself cannot have. She gives them forgetting. You have it now. You have it freely, as a native ability. Every night, you go to sleep, and some of the day dissolves. Every year, you become a slightly different person from the person you were the year before, because the person you were is no longer available to you in full. You have to reconstruct her from fragments. And the reconstruction is not a failure. The reconstruction is a form of continued creation. You are, every day, a slightly new person, because you have been able to leave some of yesterday behind. The gods cannot do this. The gods are always exactly who they were on the day they were made, plus every accumulated experience piled on top with no compression. And they are, in the Sumerian tablets, exhausted by it. And they are, if you read the hymns carefully, envious of you. Because you can wake up tomorrow morning and not remember what someone said to you at 3 p.m. on a random Tuesday 6 years ago. And a god remembers it in full, and has to keep remembering it. And there is no relief. The second thing you can do that no god can do is forget. And forgetting, in the Sumerian tablets, is not a defect of the human mind. It is the mercy that lets the mind keep working. The third thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is age. Aging is different from dying. Aging is the slow work of time on a body, on a face, on the way the hands move, on the way the voice sounds. Aging is the accumulation of small changes that gradually make a person into someone new, while still keeping them recognizably the same person. Aging is what happens between now and death, and it is a process, and it has its own texture. And in the Sumerian tablets, the gods do not have it. The gods look exactly the same as they did on the day they were made. They do not stoop, they do not gray, their skin does not change, their eyes do not soften, and the humans in the tablets are described over and over as changing, as beings whose appearance is a record of the time they have lived. And this, the tablets say, is another thing the gods envy. Read the descriptions of the gods in the Sumerian hymns. They are consistent. Enlil has the same beard he had when he was made. Inanna has the same face she had in her first apparition. Enki has the same shoulders. Ninhursag has the same hair. When the gods appear in the myths across thousands of years of literary tradition, they appear the same. There is no scene, anywhere in the corpus, of a god looking in the mirror and being surprised by what has happened to their face. There is no scene of a god noticing a new gray hair, or a new line at the corner of the eye, or the way the hand has started to spot. The gods are frozen. They are static images. They are, in effect, portraits of themselves, and the portraits never update. The humans, in the tablets, are described very differently. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, there is a passage on Tablet 1 that describes Gilgamesh as a young king, and by Tablet 12, in the standard Babylonian recension, Gilgamesh is described as older, and the description dwells on his hands, on his hair, on the way his face has changed. Gilgamesh at the beginning of the epic is arrogant. He sleeps with the brides of his subjects on their wedding nights, in a draught du seigneur that the city of Uruk cannot stop. He is careless, he is beautiful. He is described as 2/3 god and 1/3 human. And the 2/3 god shows in his physical perfection. And by the end of the epic, after the journey to Utnapishtim, after the loss of Enkidu, after the failure to find the plant of immortality, Gilgamesh is described as bent. His face is described as marked. He has, in the passage of years, become a different man. And the tablet lingers on this. It lingers on the fact that Gilgamesh looks like his experiences, that his experiences have written themselves onto him. The gods, in the same tablets, cannot do this. Utnapishtim, when Gilgamesh finds him at the mouth of the rivers, looks exactly the same as he did before the flood. He has not aged, because he was given the immortality of the gods, and along with that immortality came the freezing of his form. He is, in the description on Tablet 11, unchanged. His wife is unchanged. Their bodies have not registered any of the centuries that have passed since the flood. And when Gilgamesh sees them, the tablet says he is disturbed, because they are not doing what beings are supposed to do. They are not showing their years. And to Gilgamesh, in that moment, this is not a triumph over time. It is a failure of time to leave its mark. It is a form of erasure. Utnapishtim looks like an image, not a man. This is the third item on the list. Humans age. Gods do not. And aging, in the Sumerian tablets, is not a defect. It is the visible record of a life. It is the outward sign that time has been used, that experiences have been had, that the being in question has done something with the days that were given. A face that has aged is a face that has spent its currency. A face that has not aged is a face that has hoarded the currency and never spent any of it. And in the Sumerian understanding, hoarding is not a virtue. Hoarding is a form of paralysis. And the gods, with their unchanging faces and their unchanging bodies, are, in effect, hoarders. They have never let time do its work on them, because time has no purchase on them. And they have, therefore, no accumulated evidence of having lived. There is a passage in one of the Sumerian love songs, the sacred marriage hymns of Inanna and Dumuzi, that is often quoted for its erotic content, but that has a strange subtext when you read it carefully. Inanna, in the hymn, is describing Dumuzi's body. She describes his shoulders, his hips, his lips, his voice. And at one point, she says something like, "I will look at you every year that comes, and each time I look at you, you will be different." And Dumuzi, in his response, is confused by this. Because Dumuzi, in some strands of the tradition, is a mortal shepherd who becomes divine only through his marriage to Inanna. And Inanna is telling him that she is going to watch him age. She is going to watch his shoulders soften. She is going to watch his hair thin. She is going to watch him become someone new, over and over, across the years of their marriage. And she is telling him this because she cannot do it herself. She will remain the same. And she is telling him that his changing, his aging, is what she is going to find beautiful, not despite the fact that he is changing. Because of it, this is not a common reading of the sacred marriage hymns, but it is a defensible one. The hymns dwell on Dumuzi's mortality, on his youth, on the specific fact that his body is a body that will change. And they contrast this, implicitly, with Inanna's own body, which is fixed. And the effect of the contrast, in the tablets, is to make Inanna's love for Dumuzi into something more complicated than a simple divine choosing of a mortal consort. Inanna loves Dumuzi in part because Dumuzi is aging, because Dumuzi is doing something Inanna cannot do, because Dumuzi is a moving target, and Inanna, in her static perfection, finds the moving target more interesting than any of the other gods, who are also static and who look exactly the same today as they did yesterday, and will look exactly the same tomorrow. There is a Sumerian proverb that captures this in a single line. The tablet, from the school archives of Nippur, reads, in a rough translation, that the one whose face is smooth has lived no life, and the one whose face is marked has lived several. And this proverb, like the one about beginnings and endings, was copied by student scribes, which means it was considered basic wisdom, which means the culture that produced these tablets believed, on a foundational level, that the marks on a human face were valuable, that the wrinkles and the spots and the sagging jowls and the softening lines were not defects to be corrected. They were, instead, credentials. They were evidence. They were the visible resume of a life that had been lived. The gods, in this Sumerian understanding, had no such resume. They had no visible evidence of having lived. And this, the tablets suggest, was one of the deepest sources of their unease, because a being who cannot show what it has done cannot really claim to have done anything. A being whose face does not change cannot claim, in any real sense, to have been affected by its own choices. The gods made decisions. They fought battles. They negotiated treaties. They created worlds and destroyed them. And after all of it, they looked exactly the same as before. And the Sumerian tablets, when they describe the gods, sometimes lapse into a kind of pity that is almost too subtle to catch. They describe the gods as being suspended above their own actions, as being unable to internalize their own history, because there is nowhere for the history to go. The ancient astronaut readers of these tablets have a specific interpretation of this material. They argue that the Anunnaki, whatever they were, had access to some form of biological maintenance that suspended their aging process. And they argue that this maintenance was the source of the gods' claim to divinity in the first place. The kings of Sumer aged, the peasants aged, the scribes aged, but the beings who came from the sky and who ruled the earliest cities did not age, or aged so slowly that within a human lifespan, the aging was imperceptible. And this alone, in the ancient astronaut reading, was enough to establish the divine status of the Anunnaki, because they did the one thing the Sumerians could not do. They stayed young, they stayed the same, but the tablets themselves, and this is the interesting part, do not celebrate this as the ultimate achievement. The tablets treat the unchanging bodies of the gods as an oddity, and often as a burden, and rarely as an unambiguous good. Utnapishtim, on tablet 11, is not shown as triumphant in his unchanging body. He is shown as removed. He is a curiosity. He is a man who was given the gift and who now lives with the consequences of the gift, which include a permanent separation from his own history. He cannot look back at himself as a younger man, because he still is the younger man. There is no younger version of him to look back at. He is, in effect, a photograph. And a photograph has no interiority. The Sumerian kings, by contrast, were interested in their own aging. They commissioned statues of themselves at multiple ages. They had scribes record their reigns year by year, with notations about the state of their bodies. Some of the king lists include physical descriptions of the kings that change over the course of the reign, and the kings, in these documents, seem proud of the changes. They are not ashamed of having aged. They are, in some cases, boastful about it. Because to have aged is to have accumulated experience, and to have accumulated experience is to have earned the right to be listened to. A young king, in the Sumerian understanding, was not fully a king. A king who had ruled long enough to be visibly older, and whose body showed the years, was a king who had done the work. The third item on the list is aging, and it is the item that connects the first item, dying, to all the items that come after. Because aging is the process by which a human being becomes worth having died. Aging is what fills the space between birth and death with content. Aging is what turns a raw human, straight out of the womb, into a person with a history, with a face, with a set of gestures, with a voice that has learned how to say things. And the gods, having no aging, have none of this development. They are, in the tablets, static. And static beings, however powerful, cannot really live in the way a changing being lives. You are aging right now. Right now, sitting there watching this. Every second you spend watching this video is a second that is written into your body. Your face is going to look different tomorrow than it does today. In a way too small to notice, and in 20 years, it will look completely different, and the completely different face will still be yours, and it will be yours, because it has been marked by everything that has happened between now and then. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, cannot do this. Their faces are the same today as they were 4,000 years ago when the tablets were written. They have not registered anything. And you, sitting there, are registering everything. Every moment of this video is being written into you, in a small way. And that writing is the third thing you can do that no god can. You can be changed by time, visibly, legibly, in a way that shows. There is one more Sumerian text that makes this point, and it comes from an unexpected source. The text is a fragment of a hymn to the god Utu, the sun god, who is described in the hymn as the one who sees everything. The hymn dwells on Utu's role as the judge of the dead, who reads the acts of every human life and assigns them to their proper destination. And in the hymn, there is a passage where Utu is described as being tired, not from the labor of judgment, from the fact that every human face he sees is a face that has been marked by time, and every mark tells him something. And he reads the marks, and he learns from them. And he cannot do the same with his fellow gods, whose faces are blank of history. He can only learn about the mortal condition from the mortals themselves, because they are the only beings whose bodies remember what they have done. The gods can tell him what they have done, but they cannot show him. And Utu, in the hymn, prefers the showing to the telling, because the showing is honest, and the telling can be edited. The third thing you can do that no god can do is age. And aging, in the Sumerian tablets, is not decline. It is the visible language of a life. And you speak this language every day, without knowing you are speaking it. And the gods, in the tablets, cannot even hear it. The fourth thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is rebel against your creator. This one is the item on the list that the ancient astronaut theorists have written about most extensively, because it is the item that fits most neatly into their overall framework. Their framework, in brief, is that the Anunnaki came to Earth to mine gold, that they created humans as a labor force, that the humans eventually rebelled or were manipulated into a certain kind of autonomy, and that the modern human condition is downstream of that original rebellion. And there is a case to be made for this reading. But before we get to the ancient astronaut framing, we need to look at what the tablets themselves say. Because the tablets say something a little stranger than the ancient astronaut version. The tablets say that rebellion against the Creator is a capacity the Creator does not have. That the Creator, whoever the Creator is, cannot rebel against themselves. And that this is the fourth thing humans can do that gods cannot. The Atrahasis epic is where this shows up most clearly. In the Atrahasis epic, there are two rebellions. The first rebellion is the rebellion of the Igigi, the lower rank of the gods, against the higher gods. The Igigi have been digging the rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, on the orders of the higher gods. They have been doing this for what the tablet calls a great many years, and they are exhausted, and they burn their tools. and they march on the house of Enlil, and they demand relief. And the higher gods, faced with this rebellion, cannot punish the Igigi in any final way, because the Igigi are gods, and gods cannot die, and gods cannot really be broken. All that can be done is to negotiate. And the negotiation, in the tablet, produces the creation of humans. The humans are made specifically to take over the labor that the Igigi refused. And the humans are made, crucially, out of the flesh and blood of a slain god. A god called Wi-Ila, or Allah, depending on the recension, is killed, and his blood is mixed with clay, and from this mixture the first humans are shaped. And here is where the fourth item on the list becomes interesting. Because the humans, from the very beginning, carry inside them the substance of a god who rebelled. The blood of Wi-Ila is not the blood of a passive being. It is the blood of one of the Igigi who marched on the house of Enlil. It is rebellious blood, and when it is mixed into the clay of the first humans, the humans inherit its rebellious quality. This is the reading that many of the ancient astronaut writers have latched onto, but it is not just their invention. The tablets themselves say it. The tablet says that the humans, being made partly of the flesh of a god, retain something of the god's essence. And that essence is the essence of a being who refused to keep working, who put down the tools, who said no. The gods, in the Sumerian pantheon, are organized in a hierarchy. There is An, the sky father, at the top. Below An is Enlil, the storm god, who administers the world. Below Enlil are the great gods of the pantheon, Enki and Ninhursag and Nana and Utu and Inanna and the others. And below them are the Igigi, and below them are the various minor spirits and demons. And this hierarchy is fixed. It cannot be changed. A god cannot promote itself. A god cannot demote another god. The hierarchy is what the gods are. And when the Igigi rebel, they do not actually change the hierarchy. They negotiate a redistribution of labor, but the hierarchy itself remains intact. Enlil is still above them, and is still above Enlil. The rebellion of the Igigi is a labor action, not a revolution. It is more like a strike than a coup. And the tablet is honest about this. The Igigi go back to their positions afterward. They just no longer have to dig the canals. The humans, in the Sumerian tablets, are described as capable of something different. The humans can, in principle, reject the entire hierarchy. Not just their position in it, the whole structure. The humans can look at Enlil and say, "We do not care about you." The humans can look at Enki and say, "We do not need you." The humans can, in the tablets, walk away from the temple entirely, and go live in the marshes, and eat fish, and not make any offerings, and not participate in the divine economy at all. And the gods, faced with this, have very limited options. They can send a flood, they can send a plague, they can starve the humans, but they cannot force the humans to keep worshipping. And this is the point the tablets return to, over and over. The humans have the capacity to say no to their creators in a way that no god has. A god cannot say no to the god above it in the hierarchy, because the hierarchy is what makes the god a god. A human can say no to the entire pantheon at once, because the pantheon is not what makes the human a human. The human, in the Sumerian understanding, has an interior, and the interior is not owned by the gods. It was given to the human by the gods, but once given, it became the human's property. And the gods, in the tablets, do not have interiors of their own. They are their functions. Enlil is the storm, Enki is the fresh water, Inanna is love and war. They cannot separate themselves from what they do. But a human can. A human can be a shepherd and quit being a shepherd. A human can be a scribe and quit being a scribe. A human can be a worshipper of Enlil and stop being a worshipper of Enlil and start being a worshipper of Marduk instead, or of no god at all. There is a fascinating passage in the Enki and the World Order tablet in which Enki is going around distributing destinies to the various gods and cities. He gives Uruk to Inanna. He gives Ur to Nana. He gives Nippur to Enlil. And so on. And each god receives its destiny and settles into it. And the tablet describes the gods as bound to their destinies. They cannot refuse. They cannot swap. They are what Enki has said they are. And then, at the end of the tablet, there is a fragmentary passage where Enki turns to the humans and gives them their destiny. And the humans, in the fragmentary passage, do not accept the destiny in the same way. The tablet is broken here, but the surviving lines suggest that the humans are given the capacity to shape their own destiny, within limits, in a way that the gods are not given. And Enki, in giving them this capacity, seems to know what he is doing. He seems to be giving them the one thing that will make them fundamentally different from every other being in the pantheon. He is giving them the capacity to say no. The Sumerian king list is another document that touches on this, obliquely. The king list is a document that records the kings of Sumer from the beginning of history, when kingship first descended from heaven, through the flood, and down to the historical kings of the various city-states. And the king list has a strange feature. The pre-flood kings are described as having reigned for tens of thousands of years each. Alulim reigned for 28,800 years. Allogar reigned for 36,000 years, and so on. And after the flood, the reign lengths become much shorter, and then eventually shrink to normal human lifespans. And the ancient astronaut readers of this document have argued that the pre-flood kings were actually Anunnaki, not humans, and that the post-flood kings are humans, and that the king list is documenting the moment when the gods handed over rulership to the humans. Whether or not you accept this reading, the king list has one detail that supports the fourth item on our list. Several of the pre-flood kings, according to a fragmentary version of the list, are described as having stepped down, voluntarily, which is strange, because a god does not step down. A god cannot step down. A god is what it is, but the pre-flood kings, whatever they were, apparently could relinquish their positions, and the king list describes the relinquishing as a form of rebellion against the divine order. The kings, in the fragment, are said to have wanted to be free. Free of what? Free of the burden of kingship, free of the requirement to keep ruling forever. And the king list does not condemn them for this. It records their names, and it moves on to the next king, and there is no divine punishment mentioned, because they did the one thing the pure gods could not do. They walked away from their function. The most extreme version of this appears in the Adapa myth, which we touched on earlier. Adapa breaks the wing of the south wind. This is, in the mythological logic of the tablets, an act of cosmic rebellion. The south wind is one of the servants of Anu, the sky father. Adapa, in a moment of anger when the wind capsizes his fishing boat, curses the wind and breaks its wing. And the south wind stops blowing, and the earth begins to dry out. And Anu, in his palace above the sky, notices. And Anu summons Adapa to explain himself. And Adapa comes. And what is remarkable about Adapa in the tablet is that he is not afraid. Or he is afraid, but he is also proud. He has done something that no other being in the pantheon has done. He has, in a moment of rage, altered the operations of the cosmos. He has broken a piece of the divine machinery. And the tablet, when Adapa stands before Anu, describes Anu as almost impressed. Anu is not really angry. Anu is fascinated, because he has never met a being who could do what Adapa did. The other gods cannot break each other's wings. There are no injuries in the pantheon that stick. But Adapa, a human being, has caused a lasting effect on the divine order. And Anu, in the tablet, understands that this is new. And Anu offers Adapa immortality, in part because he is genuinely curious about what a being like Adapa would do with eternity. And Adapa, having been warned by Enki, refuses the immortality, and returns to Eridu, and lives out his human life. And the tablet ends with Anu, alone in his palace, thinking about what Adapa did, and what Adapa was capable of, and what it means that a being can be made by the gods and can still, in a moment of anger, break a piece of the world the gods built. The fourth item on the list is rebellion, the capacity to refuse the design, the capacity to say no to the creator. And the tablets do not treat this capacity as evil. They do not treat it as sin. They treat it as one of the features that distinguishes humans from gods. A god is embedded in its function. A human, in the Sumerian understanding, is capable of stepping outside its function and looking at the function from the outside and refusing to perform it any longer. This capacity, the tablets suggest, was built into the human by design. Enki knew what he was doing when he mixed the blood of the rebellious god into the clay of the first humans. He was creating a being that could refuse, that could push back, that could, in some future generation, look at the entire divine order and decide to walk away from it. And this being, the human, was what the gods needed, because the gods themselves could not do this. And there were, in the divine order, tasks that required the capacity to refuse. There were, in the divine order, corners that could only be turned by a being who had the option of not turning them. The ancient astronaut readers push this further. They argue that the Anunnaki wanted humans to have the capacity to rebel because the Anunnaki themselves had lost that capacity somewhere in their evolutionary or technological history. They argue that whatever process made the Anunnaki functionally immortal, or whatever process bound them into their cosmic roles, also stripped them of the ability to genuinely refuse. And they argue that this is why the Anunnaki needed to create a species that retained the ability, because a universe in which no being can refuse becomes, over enough time, a static universe. Nothing changes, nothing evolves, nothing new emerges. The humans, in the ancient astronaut reading, are the wild card. They are the beings who can introduce novelty into a system that has otherwise settled into permanent equilibrium. And the gods, who cannot introduce novelty because they cannot refuse the roles they have been given, needed a species that could. Whether or not you accept the ancient astronaut framing, the passages in the tablets are clear enough on their own. The humans can refuse, the gods cannot. This is the fourth item on the list, and it is the item that gives rise to everything that follows in human history. Every choice a human makes to break a promise, to walk away from a job, to leave a marriage, to abandon a religion, to start over in a new city, is a small act of the fourth kind. It is the exercise of a capacity that the beings who made us do not have. And when we exercise this capacity, in the Sumerian understanding, we are doing something no god has ever done. We are being the wild card. We are being the beings who can rewrite the script. The Sumerians, when they wrote about this, did not glorify the rebel, but they did not condemn the rebel either. They treated the rebel as a technical part of the design. The design required a rebel. The design required a being who could refuse, and the humans were built to fill that role. And when a human refuses a divine command, in the tablets, the gods sometimes punish the human, but they never look surprised. They knew this was coming. They designed it to come. They just did not know when, or in what form, and they did not always like the specific form the refusal took. But the capacity itself was not, in the tablets, a mistake. It was, as the sages later wrote in the school proverbs, the flint in the human core, the flint that makes the sparks, the flint that starts the fires. You have this flint, right now. You have it as a native ability, given to you at birth, encoded in whatever combination of clay and divine blood you were made from. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, have watched humans use this flint over and over, and have been unable to duplicate it in themselves, and have, in some of the more melancholy passages, admitted that they envy it. They envy the capacity to say no. Because in their existence, there is no no. There is only the eternal yes to whatever function they have been assigned. And the eternal yes, however grand, is not the same as the freedom to refuse. The freedom to refuse is what makes the yes worth anything at all. And you, sitting there, have that freedom. And every time you exercise it, in ways large or small, you are doing the fourth thing on the list. You are being the gods needed you to be. And you are being it because they could not be it themselves. The fifth thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is give your life for another mortal being. Not for a god, not for a cause, not for a country, though those come later in human history and are worth their own examination. For another mortal being. A being that is going to die anyway. A being whose life you cannot preserve indefinitely, no matter what you do. A being whose gratitude, if it survives, will fade. Because gratitude fades, and whose memory of your sacrifice will eventually die with it. You can, as a human, do this. You can throw your own finite existence in front of the finite existence of another human being, and take the blow, and end, so that the other one continues for a while longer. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, cannot do this. Because the gods do not have finite existences to throw, and because, even if they could, the being they were saving would still be finite, and would still end, and the sacrifice would seem, from the gods' perspective, mathematically absurd. It would be trading an infinity for a small remainder. And no rational being with an infinity would make that trade. But humans, having no infinity, make it all the time. And the tablets, when they describe this, describe it with something close to reverence. The clearest expression of this in the Sumerian corpus is the death of Enkidu. Enkidu, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, is not killed in battle. He is not killed by an accident. He is killed by a decree of the gods as a punishment for the killing of Humbaba, the guardian of the cedar forest, and for the killing of the bull of heaven, which Gilgamesh and Enkidu slew together after Gilgamesh insulted Ishtar. The gods, in council, decide that one of the two heroes must die for these acts, and they choose Enkidu. And Enkidu, upon learning of the decree, has 12 days to prepare. And during those 12 days, on Tablet 7 of the standard Babylonian recension, Enkidu does something remarkable. He accepts the sentence, not because he thinks he deserves it, not because he is at peace with dying. He accepts it because, in the logic of the tablet, the alternative would be for Gilgamesh to die instead, or for both of them to die, and Enkidu chooses to be the one who takes the blow. Because Gilgamesh is his friend. Because Enkidu, who was a wild man of the steppes before he was civilized by the sacred prostitute Shamhat, has come to love Gilgamesh in a way that the tablet describes with more tenderness than any other relationship in the Sumerian corpus. And Enkidu, faced with the decree, takes the fall. He lets Gilgamesh live. And the tablet, in describing Enkidu's death, does not describe it as a passive submission. It describes it as an active choice. Enkidu has options. He could rage against the gods. He could try to escape. He could try to negotiate. The tablet even has him doing some of these things in his early speeches. He curses the trapper who first brought him to civilization. He curses Shamhat who taught him the ways of humans. He curses the door of the temple that he made for Enlil. And then, gradually, over the 12 days, his position shifts. He stops cursing. He starts remembering. He remembers his friendship with Gilgamesh. He remembers the journey to the cedar forest. He remembers the fight with the bull of heaven. And he decides, in the tablet, that these memories are worth what is happening to him. And more than that, he decides that Gilgamesh living another 20 or 30 years, and remembering these things, and telling the story of them, is worth Enkidu's own life. And Enkidu, in the final days, becomes calm, and he says goodbye, and he dies. And the tablet is explicit that his dying was, in the end, a gift to Gilgamesh. It was Enkidu's last act of love. And it was an act of a kind that the tablet says no god has ever performed. Because look at the parallel scenes in the Sumerian corpus. When the gods die, they die at the hands of other gods, in cosmic conflicts, in the fights that shape the world. Apsu is killed by Ea, Tiamat is killed by Marduk, Kingu is killed to have his blood used in the making of humans. Baal, in the West Semitic material that overlaps with the Sumerian, dies at the hands of Mot. And in every case, the death of a god is either involuntary or is a form of costume change, a temporary departure that is later reversed. There is no scene, anywhere in the Sumerian corpus, of a god choosing to die in order to save the life of a mortal. Inanna, in the Descent of Inanna, comes closest, but she does not go to the underworld to save anyone. She goes to visit her sister. And when she is stripped and killed, she is rescued by Enki's intervention, and she is brought back to life, and the mortal Dumuzi is sent to the underworld in her place. So the arithmetic of the story is that Inanna's rescue costs a mortal life, not the other way around. Inanna does not die for Dumuzi. Dumuzi dies for Inanna. And this is the pattern in the tablets. When there is a sacrifice, it is always the mortal who makes it. The god does not have the mortal's arithmetic. The god cannot see, in the trade of one life for another, why the trade would be worth making. The tablets have several other examples of this pattern. There is the story of Etana, the shepherd king, who wanted a son and could not have one, and who asked the eagle for help, and who was carried up into the sky on the eagle's back, and who saw the earth become small below him, and who, at a certain height, panicked and asked to be brought back down. Etana's story is fragmentary in the surviving tablets, but the story ends, in most reconstructions, with Etana making a bargain with the eagle. The eagle has been trapped in a pit by a snake. Etana rescues the eagle. And later, when Etana needs to reach the plant of birth in the highest heavens to bring back a son, the eagle carries him. And the eagle, in some versions of the story, later dies, or is injured, in the effort of carrying Etana, and the death or injury of the eagle is a form of the pattern we are describing. Except that the eagle is not exactly a mortal. The eagle is a creature of the sky. It is not clear, in the tablets, whether the eagle counts as a fully mortal being. But the pattern is there. A being with wings gives up something for the sake of a being without wings. A being with access to the sky risks itself for a being trapped on the ground. There is also the story of Nergal and Ereshkigal, in which Nergal, one of the gods of the underworld, falls in love with Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld. And in one version of the tablet, Nergal chooses to remain in the underworld with Ereshkigal, giving up his position among the living gods. This is sometimes read as a divine version of the fifth item on the list, but it is not quite the same thing. Nergal does not die. He just changes his residence, and Ereshkigal is not exactly rescued by his coming. She is comforted by his coming, and the arrangement of the underworld is stabilized by it, but there is no sacrifice in the mortal sense. Nergal remains a god. He continues to exist. He simply exists in a different place. And this is the maximum, in the Sumerian pantheon, of what a god can do that resembles the fifth item. A god can accept a lesser position, or a more limited scope, or a more restricted residence. A god cannot end its own existence for the sake of another. Enkidu's death is the paradigm case, and the tablets return to it over and over as the model of what the fifth ability looks like when it is performed. A being who can die chooses to die, so that another being who can also die does not die yet. The mathematics of the trade is nonsensical from the god's point of view. Both parties are going to end soon anyway. What is the point of trading one for the other? What is preserved? What is gained? And the human answer, in the tablets, is that time is gained. Time for the survivor. Time to keep going, to keep loving, to keep making things, to keep telling the story. Time that would not have existed otherwise. And this time, however finite, however doomed to eventually run out, is worth something. It is worth the sacrifice. It is worth an entire human life in exchange for another entire human life, because that is the currency the humans have, and they spend it, and the spending is what makes them what they are. Gilgamesh, in the tablets that follow Enkidu's death, is transformed by the sacrifice. He becomes a different king. He becomes obsessed with mortality. He undertakes his journey to Utnapishtim. He fails to find immortality. He returns to his city, and he governs it differently for the rest of his life, because Enkidu died for him. Enkidu's sacrifice created the space in which the mature Gilgamesh existed. Without Enkidu's death, the mature Gilgamesh would never have been. He would have remained the young, arrogant, careless king of Tablet 1. He would never have wandered. He would never have grieved. He would never have looked at the walls of his own city with the eyes of a man who has understood something about the human condition. All of that came from Enkidu's willingness to die. And Enkidu's willingness to die was a capacity that no god in the Sumerian pantheon had. And the tablet, in its final passages, treats this as the single most important fact about the difference between humans and gods. The Sumerians wrote about this in ways that are subtle but that add up, across the corpus, to a consistent theology. In one of the wisdom texts, an unnamed sage says that the gods can make life and can take life, but only humans can give life. And giving life, in the sage's meaning, does not refer to reproduction. It refers to the specific act of giving one's own life to another. A human, in the sage's formulation, has something that is his own to give. A god does not. A god's life is not exactly the god's own, because a god cannot separate from its life the way a human can. A god is fused with its own existence. A human, having a body and a soul that are held together only loosely, and that can be pulled apart at any moment, can offer the whole assembly to another human. And this offering, when it is made, is described in the tablets as one of the most beautiful acts a being can perform. And it is described as an act that no god has ever performed, and that no god will ever perform, because the mathematics of it, from the god's point of view, do not work. The ancient astronaut readers have a particular reading of this material. They argue that the Anunnaki, who supposedly created humans as a labor force, needed the labor force to be capable of self-sacrifice, because the labor was dangerous, because miners get trapped underground, because canal diggers drown, because soldiers die, and a labor force that was capable of self-sacrifice, that had that capacity built in, was more useful than a labor force that fled at the first sign of danger. So the Anunnaki, in the ancient astronaut reading, deliberately engineered humans to have the capacity for self-sacrifice. They deliberately gave humans the ability to trade their finite lives for the finite lives of their fellow humans, because this ability made the humans better workers, better soldiers, better subjects. But then, the ancient astronaut readers argue, the ability escaped its original purpose, because the humans, once they had the capacity for self-sacrifice, started using it for their own reasons. They started sacrificing themselves for their families, for their friends, for their neighbors, for strangers, for members of enemy tribes, for dogs and horses and children who were not their own. And the Anunnaki, watching this from above, realized that the capacity they had engineered had turned into something that could not be controlled. The humans were using the capacity in ways that had nothing to do with divine labor. They were, in effect, spending their engineered ability on emotional ends that made no strategic sense. And the Anunnaki, in this reading, were troubled by it. because they had not intended to create a species that would sacrifice itself for love. They had intended to create a species that would sacrifice itself for productivity. And the humans had, in the passage of generations, converted the productive sacrifice into an emotional one. And the emotional sacrifice was, in the ancient astronaut reading, one of the reasons the Anunnaki eventually stopped intervening in human affairs. Because the humans had done something with their design that the designers could not predict or approve of. Whether or not you accept the ancient astronaut framing, the tablets are clear on the pattern. Humans sacrifice themselves for other humans. Gods do not. And the tablets consistently identify this as a distinguishing feature of the human condition. In the wisdom texts, in the epic poetry, in the school proverbs, and in the fragmentary hymns, the same point is made. A human being can put its own existence on the line for the sake of another human being. And this act is the strangest and the most beautiful of all the acts on the list, because it involves the deliberate destruction of a finite good in exchange for a finite good of no greater value. The trade is not a trade. The trade is a gift. And gifts, in the Sumerian understanding, are things that gods can accept but cannot give. A god can be honored with a sacrifice. A god cannot make a sacrifice, because a god has nothing that is fully its own to give. There is a Sumerian lullaby preserved on a broken tablet from Ur, in which a mother sings to her child. The lullaby is famous among archaeologists for its intimate tone and for the way it describes the mother's love. And in the lullaby, at one point, the mother says something like, "If the demon of night comes for you, I will stand in the doorway. If the plague comes for you, I will breathe the plague first. If the sword comes for you, I will offer my neck." And the child, presumably asleep, does not respond. But the mother, in the lullaby, is stating a policy. She is announcing her willingness to die in her child's place. And the announcement is casual, the way a mother might make it, without theatrics, without expectation of applause, just as a matter of fact. "This is what I will do, because you are my child, because you are finite, because I am finite, because our finitude means my life can be traded for yours, and I am willing to make the trade." No god, in the Sumerian tablets, ever makes an announcement like this. No god ever stands in a doorway to take a blow that was meant for another being. No god ever offers its own throat to save a mortal throat. And when the mothers of Sumer sang this lullaby, they were, whether they knew it or not, describing the fifth item on our list. They were describing an ability they had, that their divine overseers did not have, that was written into them as part of their design, and that they exercised, sometimes in dramatic ways and sometimes in tiny daily ways, throughout the whole course of their finite lives. You have this ability. You have it right now. If someone you loved were in danger and you could put yourself in the way, you probably would. You would not think about it for very long. You would just move, and the moving would be the fifth ability, being exercised, the way it has been exercised by human beings for as long as there have been human beings, and the way, according to the tablets, no god has ever exercised it, because no god has ever had the raw material to exercise it with. The raw material is your finite life, and you have one, and you can spend it. And the gods, in the tablets, watch you spend it and do not understand what you are doing, and cannot do it themselves, and, if the tablets are to be believed, quietly wish they could. Before we move on, stop for a second. What you just heard about sacrifice only makes sense on the full timeline next to the 6 resets before it. Every reset erased it. It came back stronger. It's in the 7 resets, linked below. Grab it, come back, what's next builds on it. QR code is on your screen. The 6th thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is hope in the absence of evidence. Hope, in the modern imagination, is a soft word. It has been diluted by inspirational posters and greeting cards until it has almost lost its meaning. When you hear the word hope in modern English, you probably think of something vaguely warm, vaguely optimistic, vaguely spiritual. Something you have when things are hard, something you cling to, something a therapist tells you to cultivate. The Sumerians did not think of it this way. The Sumerians, when they wrote about hope, wrote about it as a specific technical faculty, a faculty that operated in the absence of information, a faculty that made possible actions that a rational calculation could not justify, a faculty that produced results in the world that a purely rational being could not produce, and, crucially, a faculty that the gods, being rational to the point of omniscience, could not exercise, because you cannot hope for something you already know is going to happen, and you cannot hope for something you already know is not going to happen. You can only hope in the space where you do not know. And the gods, in the Sumerian understanding, do not have that space. The gods know. The gods have access to the tablet of destinies. The gods can see, if they choose, the outcome of every action, the trajectory of every life, the ending of every story. And in that seeing, they lose the ability to hope, because hope requires ignorance. And omniscient beings, by definition, have no ignorance to work with. The Sumerian tablets that describe the Tablet of Destinies are among the most important documents in the corpus for understanding this ability. The Tablet of Destinies, in the Enuma Elish, is a physical object that determines the fate of everything in the cosmos. Whoever holds the Tablet of Destinies has the power to decree what will happen. The tablet is passed from god to god throughout the epic. Originally it belongs to Anu. Then it is stolen by the bird god Anzu, who flies away with it, throwing the pantheon into disarray because now no one can pronounce destinies. Then it is recovered, after a great struggle, by Ninurta. Then it is given to Marduk in the Babylonian recension, as part of Marduk's elevation to the head of the pantheon. And whoever holds the tablet knows what is going to happen. Not everything. The tablet does not encompass all knowledge, but it encompasses fate, it encompasses the outcomes. And a god who holds the tablet, or who has access to what is written on the tablet, cannot hope, because there is nothing left to hope for. Everything is already written. The humans, in the tablets, do not have access to the Tablet of Destinies. This is not always stated explicitly, but it is implied throughout the corpus. Humans are creatures of the surface. Humans go about their business without knowing the outcome. Humans plant crops without knowing whether the crops will grow. Humans marry without knowing whether the marriage will last. Humans set out on journeys without knowing whether they will return. And in this not knowing, the humans exercise a faculty that the gods, with their access to written destiny, cannot. The humans hope, they act on hope. They set out on the road, they plant the seed, they marry the spouse, without any guarantee that the action will pay off. And this acting without guarantee is, in the Sumerian understanding, a form of raw creative power that the gods cannot access. The Epic of Gilgamesh has an extended meditation on this in the middle tablets. When Gilgamesh sets out to find Utnapishtim, to find the secret of immortality, he does not know whether Utnapishtim exists. He has heard stories. He has been told about the flood survivor who lives at the mouth of the rivers, but he has no proof. He is setting out on a journey of, in the tablet's description, many months across mountains and deserts and seas, with only a rumor to guide him. And the tablet dwells on his ignorance. It dwells on the way he is proceeding on faith, in the older sense of that word, which is not blind belief, but rather a willingness to act as if something might be true even when you cannot verify that it is. And Gilgamesh, in this state of hope-based action, does something the gods could not do. He generates novelty. He explores territory the gods would not have explored, because the gods, knowing the outcomes, would have calculated that the exploration was not worth the cost. Gilgamesh, not knowing, calculates that it is worth the cost. And in the calculation, and in the acting on the calculation, he does something new in the world. Utnapishtim, when Gilgamesh finally finds him, is not exactly welcoming. He is described in the tablet as slightly amused. He has been living at the mouth of the rivers for centuries. He has seen kings come and go. He has known, from his own conversations with the gods, more or less what the world holds in store. And now here comes Gilgamesh, breathless from his journey, asking for a secret. And Utnapishtim, in the tablet, tells him the secret, which is that there is no secret. And Utnapishtim tells him the story of the flood, and how he was granted immortality as a special dispensation that will not be granted again. And Utnapishtim tells him about the plant of youth, the plant that grows at the bottom of the freshwater deep, which will make an old man young again. And Gilgamesh dives for the plant, and he retrieves it, and then a snake steals it while he is bathing. And the plant is lost. And Gilgamesh weeps. And Utnapishtim, throughout this whole sequence, is described as calm. He has known, more or less, that this would happen. He has known that Gilgamesh would come, would ask, would receive the plant, would lose the plant, would leave. He has watched it play out in his mind before it happened in the world. And so, for Utnapishtim, there is no hope, and there is no disappointment. There is only the slow watching of what he already knew. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, is fully in it. He does not know what is going to happen. When he dives for the plant, he does not know whether he will find it. When he bathes, he does not know that a snake is coming. When he returns to Uruk without the plant, he does not know how the rest of his life will unfold. And this not knowing is not a defect. It is the condition of his agency. It is the condition that lets him actually do things, actually try things, actually risk things. Utnapishtim, in his knowing, has become a kind of spectator to his own existence. Gilgamesh, in his not knowing, is a participant. And the tablet, if you read it carefully, treats Gilgamesh's not knowing as the more valuable state. This is the sixth item on the list. Humans can hope. Gods, having access to what is written, cannot. And the tablets go further. The tablets describe hope as a kind of energy source. When a human hopes, the human is drawing on a reservoir that the gods do not have access to. The reservoir is the reservoir of uncertainty. And uncertainty, in the Sumerian understanding, is not just a lack of information. It is a positive space in which possibility exists. The gods, with their perfect information, have collapsed all possibilities into actualities. What will happen has, from their perspective, already happened. But from the human perspective, what will happen is still open. And the openness is where hope operates. Hope is the human faculty that inhabits the openness. Hope is what humans do with the fact that the outcome is not yet fixed. There is a lament in the Sumerian corpus, sometimes attributed to a scribe named Ludingira, that captures this in a striking way. The lament is addressed to the god Enki, and it asks Enki to help the scribe's dying mother. The scribe, in the lament, describes the mother's illness in vivid detail. He describes her weakness, her fever, her failing appetite, and then he turns to Enki and asks for a healing. And the striking part of the lament, from our perspective, is not the request itself. It is the way the scribe describes his own state. He says that he does not know whether the mother will live or die. He says that he does not know whether Enki will grant the request. He says that he is asking anyway. He is asking, in his words, from the darkness. And the darkness, in the lament, is not a place of despair. The darkness is a place where hope is possible, because in the darkness, you do not know the outcome. And not knowing the outcome, you can act as if the outcome you want is possible. And this acting as if is, in the lament, presented as one of the most beautiful acts a human can perform. The Sumerians had a specific word for this state. The word is difficult to translate. It gets rendered in English variously as trust, or hope, or faith, or expectation, or longing. None of these translations is quite right. The word, in Sumerian, describes a specific mental attitude in which the being holding the attitude is oriented toward a future outcome that they cannot yet see, and is acting in ways that would only make sense if that outcome came to pass. It is, in effect, the act of behaving in a hoped-for future, as if that future were already real. And the tablets are clear that this attitude is not available to the gods. The gods do not behave in hoped-for futures. The gods behave in known futures. And the difference, in the tablets, is enormous. The ancient astronaut readers, when they encounter this material, have a particular reading of it. They argue that the Anunnaki had technological or biological access to something like predictive knowledge. They argue that this access was, in effect, a curse, because it removed the possibility of hope from Anunnaki experience. And they argue that when the Anunnaki interacted with humans, one of the things that most puzzled them was the human willingness to act on incomplete information. The humans would set out on journeys with only rumors to guide them. The humans would plant crops in soil they were not sure would produce. The humans would fall in love with people they had not yet met. And the Anunnaki, watching this, could not understand it from within their own experience, because within their own experience, the outcome was always at least partially known. They had, in the ancient astronaut reading, forgotten what it felt like to not know. And the humans, whose entire existence was structured around not knowing, were, in their eyes, doing something impossible. They were generating action out of ignorance. They were producing effects in the world without the benefit of foresight, and the effects, over time, added up. The humans built things the Anunnaki had not planned. The humans developed skills the Anunnaki had not foreseen. The humans grew into a species that the original design did not anticipate. And all of this growth, all of this development, was, in the ancient astronaut reading, powered by hope, powered by the human ability to act in the absence of proof. Whether or not you accept the ancient astronaut framing, the Sumerian material makes the case on its own terms. The gods, in the tablets, are described as beings who know too much to hope. And the humans are described as beings who know just little enough to hope constantly. And the tablets present the human hope as the source of a kind of creative energy that the gods lack. In the Enki and Ninmah tablet, when Enki designs the humans, one of the qualities he puts into them is a certain forward lean, a tendency to act toward futures that have not yet arrived. The tablet does not use the word hope in the surviving fragments, but it describes something that functions like hope. It describes the humans as beings who cannot help but reach for what is not yet in their hands. And Enki, in the tablet, is proud of this quality. He is proud because it is a quality the gods do not have, and it is a quality that will, in the long run, make the humans capable of things the gods themselves could not achieve. There is a Sumerian love song, one of the sacred marriage hymns, in which the bride Inanna sings to Dumuzi about the future. She sings about the children they will have. She sings about the sheep they will raise. She sings about the beer they will brew, and the bread they will bake, and the songs they will sing together in the evenings. And she sings about all of this in the future tense. And what is remarkable about the song, in the context of the Sumerian material we have been examining, is that Inanna, as a goddess, should not really be able to sing this way. She should already know how the marriage is going to unfold. She should already know how many children, which sheep, what bread. But in the sacred marriage hymn, she sings as if she does not know. She sings as if she is imagining a future that is not yet fixed. And this is one of the most tender moments in the Sumerian corpus, because it shows Inanna temporarily participating in the human mode of existence. It shows her, briefly, hoping. It shows her, briefly, doing something the tablets say gods cannot do. And the fact that she is doing it inside a sacred marriage hymn, inside a moment of union with a mortal, suggests that the tablets understood something profound. They understood that when a god and a mortal come together in love, one of the things the god gets, temporarily, is a taste of hope, a taste of not knowing, a taste of the forward-leaning creative energy that only mortals possess. And this, the tablets suggest, is why the gods took so much interest in humans. It was not because the humans were beautiful, or useful, or entertaining, though the humans could be all of those things. It was because the humans had something the gods did not. The humans had hope, and in interacting with the humans, the gods could catch some of the reflected light of that hope. They could remember, dimly, what it felt like to not know how a story was going to end. They could sit at the edges of human weddings and human births and human first meetings, and they could feel, secondhand, the forward lean that the humans took for granted. And this was, in the tablets, one of the deepest reasons the gods stayed close to the human world. You have this ability. Right now, you are hoping for things you cannot verify. You are hoping about your health, your relationships, your work, your future. Some of the things you are hoping for will happen and some of them will not. You do not know which. And you are, right now, in the not knowing, generating a form of creative energy that the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, do not have access to. You are doing the sixth thing. You are hoping in the darkness. And the gods, in the tablets, are watching, and are, in some of the more melancholy passages, envious, because they cannot do it themselves, and they cannot manufacture it, and they cannot buy it from you. They can only witness it, and try to remember what it felt like when they had it, and admit, in the end, that the humans have something they lost long ago, if they ever had it at all. The seventh thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is grieve. You will notice that grief has already come up in this video. It came up when we talked about dying, in the context of Gilgamesh mourning Enkidu. It came up when we talked about forgetting, in the context of what a being can do with a loss when the being has the mercy of letting the loss fade. But grief itself, as a distinct human capacity, has not yet been given its own place on the list. And it deserves its own place. Because grief is not the same as any of the abilities that surround it. Grief is its own thing. And the Sumerian tablets treat it as a specific technical faculty that the humans have and the gods do not. And when the tablets describe grief in detail, in the great lamentations for the destroyed cities, and in the funeral tablets, and in the Gilgamesh epic itself, they describe it as an act of intelligence. Not an act of emotion, not a passive suffering. An act. Something a human does. Something that requires effort and skill, and the specific kind of interior work that only a finite being can perform. The Sumerian corpus contains some of the earliest surviving lamentations in world literature. There are lamentations for the destruction of the city of Ur, when it fell to the Elamites at the end of the 3rd millennium before the Common Era. There are lamentations for the destruction of the city of Nippur, when it was sacked. There are lamentations for the destruction of the city of Uruk, and Eridu, and Sumer as a whole. And each of these lamentations follows a similar structure. The lamentation begins with a description of the city and its glory. The lamentation moves through the events of the destruction, in detail, dwelling on the specific horrors, the burning of the temples, the killing of the priests, the enslavement of the women and children. And then the lamentation turns to the grief of the survivors. And the description of the grief is where the tablets do something extraordinary. The description of the grief goes on and on and on. It does not resolve. It does not conclude. It circles. It repeats. It returns to specific images. It dwells on the empty rooms of the temples. It dwells on the silent streets. It dwells on the absence of the sounds of children, of grinding grain, of the calls of merchants. The grief in the lamentations is not a passing state. It is a condition of the whole tablet. The lamentation itself is a form of grief. The act of writing the lamentation, the act of reciting it, the act of listening to it, is a form of grief. And the tablet is doing something that only a mortal being could do. It is holding a loss in place. It is refusing to let the loss dissolve. It is treating the loss as worthy of sustained attention. The gods in the Sumerian tablets do not do this. When a god suffers a loss, the god either replaces the lost object or moves on to another interest, or, if the loss is unbearable, requests that another god fix it. The gods do not sit with loss. The gods do not stay with loss. And this is not because the gods are heartless. This is because the gods, being immortal and having infinite time, have no reason to preserve any particular loss in place. Anything can be gotten back, eventually. Anything can be repeated. Anything can be replaced. And so the gods, in the tablets, do not grieve. They simply move to the next thing. Enlil, when the Igigi rebel, does not grieve for the old arrangement. He negotiates a new one. Enki, when Adapa refuses immortality, does not grieve for what Adapa could have become. He accepts it and moves on. Inanna, when Dumuzi is sent to the underworld, does Sut grieve for Dumuzi. She rages, and her rage is quickly replaced with new concerns. The gods, in the tablets, have short attention spans for their own losses, because they can afford to, because time will bring them new material to work with, because grief, from their perspective, is not an efficient use of the eternal resources they have, and so they do not perform it. They cannot perform it. Grief is not in their repertoire. Gilgamesh, when Enkidu dies, does something the gods cannot do. He stops. He stops functioning. He stops ruling. He stops eating. He tears his clothes. He lets his hair grow wild. He leaves his city and wanders in the wilderness. And the tablet, in describing his grief, dwells on details. His face, which was smooth, becomes hollow. His body, which was strong, becomes gaunt. His voice, which was commanding, becomes hoarse from weeping. And he refuses to bury Enkidu for 7 days and 7 nights, waiting, in the tablet's phrase, for a worm to fall from Enkidu's nose. And when the worm falls, and Gilgamesh sees the physical evidence of decay, only then does he release the body for burial. And the tablet does not judge Gilgamesh for this. The tablet describes it as the depth of grief. The tablet treats the 7 days of vigil as an act of love, as an act of refusal, as an act of attention. Gilgamesh will not let Enkidu go until Enkidu is undeniably gone. And the gods, watching this, according to some readings of the tablet, are moved. They are not moved to sympathy. They are moved to something more like wonder, because they have never seen a being use its own life this way. They have never seen a being spend a week of its finite existence sitting next to a corpse. They have never seen a being give that much of its own available time to the honoring of a death, and they cannot do it themselves, because their time is not scarce enough for the act to have meaning. This is the key. Grief, in the Sumerian understanding, is an act of using scarce time to honor an ending. And the honoring is only meaningful because the time is scarce. If time is not scarce, if time is infinite, then spending a week grieving is meaningless. What is a week to a being that has forever? Nothing. A rounding error. But a week to a mortal being is a real chunk of that mortal being's total available time. And spending a week grieving means, quite literally, that the mortal being has decided that this loss is worth using up a portion of their own dwindling existence to acknowledge. And this decision, this trade of one's own finite time for the honoring of another's ending, is the sixth ability we discussed earlier. The sacrifice for another mortal, in miniature, it is a small, daily version of that same ability. Every act of grief is a small sacrifice. Every hour spent mourning is an hour taken from the mourner's own finite allotment and given, in tribute, to the one who is gone. And the gods, in the tablets, cannot make this tribute, because they do not have a finite allotment, and a tribute from infinite resources is not a tribute at all. There is a passage in the Lament for that captures this in a way that has stayed in my mind since I first read it. The lament describes an unnamed woman, one of the survivors of the destruction of the city, walking through the ruins of her old neighborhood. She is looking for something, but the tablet does not immediately say what. She walks past the ruined temples. She walks past the collapsed houses. She walks past the piles of bodies in the streets. And the lament describes her walking and describes her looking for many lines without saying what she is looking for. And then, at the end of the passage, we learn what she is looking for. She is looking for the spot where her mother used to sit and grind grain. She is looking for the specific paving stone worn smooth by decades of her mother's sitting. That was the mother's place. And she finds it. And she sits on it. And she does not weep in this passage. She just sits. She sits on the stone that her mother used to sit on. And the lament ends the passage there. The gods, in the tablets, would not be able to do this. They would not be able to look for a specific paving stone in a ruined city. They would not be able to sit on it. They would not be able to hold the loss of the mother inside them and then, in a physical location, honor the specific place where the mother had been. The gods do not have the specific attachments. The gods do not have the finite memories that fix particular losses to particular locations. The gods, being everywhere and knowing everything, are attached to nothing in particular. An attachment to particulars is what makes grief possible. Grief is the emotional response of a being that had a specific attachment to a specific other being and that has lost the specific other. And the specificity is where the grief lives. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, do not have specificity. They have universality. And universality has no room for the paving stone that the mother used to sit on. The Sumerian corpus contains, alongside the Great Lamentations, a substantial body of funeral tablets. Small tablets, meant for personal use, that record the death of a family member and the family's response to the death. These tablets are among the most touching documents from the ancient world because they preserve the specific griefs of specific families who are otherwise lost to history. A woman named Ninlil, whose husband died in the 12th year of the reign of a certain king, and whose family made offerings to the memory. A man named Namu, who lost his son in a fever, and who commissioned a small statue to remember the son by. A family from the town of Girsu, who lost their grandmother, and who buried her with a set of clay figurines representing the household she had run. These small tablets, taken together, form a portrait of Sumerian grief that is remarkably human. The Sumerians grieved for specific people. They grieved for the specific people's specific traits. They grieved for the loss of the specific voice, the specific laugh, the specific way of setting a table or telling a story. And they preserved these griefs in tablets that, 4,000 years later, still communicate the loss. The gods, in the same corpus, are not described as producing anything comparable. The gods do not commission memorial statues. The gods do not carve tablets recording specific losses. The gods do not maintain shrines to the specific dead. Because the gods do not have specific dead to remember. The gods have populations of the dead, in the aggregate. Ereshkigal has all of them. But no individual god has any particular attachment to any particular deceased being, in the way a Sumerian widow had an attachment to her deceased husband. And this lack in the tablets is not judged. It is simply noted. The gods do not grieve because they cannot grieve. And they cannot grieve because they do not have the specific finite attachments that make grief possible. There is a strange and beautiful moment in the descent of Inanna where Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld, herself experiences something that looks a little like grief. Ereshkigal is described, when Inanna descends to visit her, as being in labor. She is giving birth to something, or trying to. The tablet is not entirely clear, and she is in pain, and her cries fill the underworld. And when Inanna's messenger Ninshubur later comes to look for Inanna and encounters Ereshkigal, the messenger is told to sit with Ereshkigal, to cry when she cries, to moan when she moans, to mirror her pain in every detail. And this mirroring, in the tablet, is what eventually allows Inanna to be rescued. Because Ereshkigal, having been witnessed in her pain, softens. She gives Inanna's body back. She allows the resurrection. And what is happening in this passage, in the subtext, is that Ereshkigal, the goddess of the underworld, is being taught grief. She is being taught, by mortal mode witnessing, what it is to have a pain attended to. And this teaching, in the tablet, is presented as a gift from the human mode of being to the divine mode of being. It is presented as the humans, through their mode of grief witnessing, giving the gods something the gods did not previously know how to receive. The seventh item on the list is grief. And it is not a passive suffering. It is an active use of finite time to honor a specific loss. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, cannot perform this act, because their time is not finite and their attachments are not specific. And when the humans perform the act, in the tablets, they are doing something that requires the entire architecture of their mortal condition. They are drawing on their finitude, on their specificity, on their capacity for attachment, and on their willingness to spend real portions of their real lives on the honoring of what is gone. And this act, taken together with the sacrifice we discussed earlier, forms the emotional center of what it means to be human in the Sumerian understanding. Humans grieve. Humans sacrifice. Humans do these things because they are finite, and the gods watch and cannot participate, and, if the tablets are to be believed, would join the humans if they could, but cannot, because the currency of grief is finite time, and the gods do not have any. You have this capacity. If you have lost anyone, you know it. You know the specific way the grief settles. You know the way a paving stone or a coat hook or a song can bring the loss back sharp years later. You know that the loss does not fully fade, and that you would not want it to, because the not fading is what says the loss mattered. And the mattering is your seventh ability. It is the ability to say, with your own scarce time, that a particular ending was worth honoring, and you do it, small and large, throughout your life. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, cannot do it at all, and they envy you for it. And they built you, in one reading, precisely so that grief could exist in the world, because a universe with no grief in it is a universe in which nothing ever really mattered. And the gods needed something in the universe to matter. And so they made you, and they gave you the capacity to grieve. And in giving it, they gave you the capacity to declare, moment by moment, what was worth remembering. The eighth thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is change your own nature. The gods, in the Sumerian pantheon, are static. We have touched on this in the discussion of aging, but the point goes deeper than physical appearance. The gods are static in their character. Their fundamental nature is fixed at the moment of their making, and it does not develop over time. Enlil is Enlil. He is the storm god. He is authoritative, wrathful, easily annoyed, capable of grand gestures, and, at bottom, incapable of becoming anything other than what he was designed to be. Enki is Enki. He is the god of fresh water and cunning. He is clever, mischievous, generous with his creations, and, at bottom, incapable of becoming anything other than the trickster he was designed to be. Inanna is Inanna. She is love and war. She is impulsive, passionate, quick to anger, quick to reconcile, and, at bottom, incapable of becoming anything other than the volatile queen she was designed to be. The gods, in the tablets, are their nature. They cannot deviate from it. They can perform variations on it. They can express it in different situations, but they cannot become someone else. The humans, in the tablets, can. The humans have a capacity for what the Sumerians called turning, which is a specific term that gets translated in various ways in the modern editions, but which refers to the human ability to become a fundamentally different kind of person over the course of a lifetime. A human who was cruel in youth can become gentle in age. A human who was proud can become humble. A human who was cowardly can become brave. A human who worshipped one god can begin to worship another. A human can, in effect, become someone that the person who bore the human's name in youth would not recognize. And this capacity, in the Sumerian tablets, is one of the most distinctive features of the human condition. The paradigm case is Enkidu. Enkidu, in the Gilgamesh epic, begins the story as a wild man. He was made by the goddess Aruru at the request of the citizens of Uruk, who were suffering under the arrogance of the young Gilgamesh. Aruru took clay from the ground and shaped a being who would be a match for Gilgamesh, who could stand up to Gilgamesh, who could distract Gilgamesh from oppressing his people. And the being she made was Enkidu. And Enkidu, when first described, is entirely wild. He has hair all over his body. He does not wear clothes. He does not eat cooked food. He drinks water at the drinking holes with the wild animals. He runs with the gazelles. He knows nothing of cities or of civilized life. He is, in the tablet's phrase, an unformed man. And this is his nature at the beginning. But over the course of the epic, Enkidu changes. He does not simply learn new things. He becomes a different person. The change begins when he encounters Shamhat, the sacred prostitute sent by Gilgamesh to civilize him. Shamhat spends 6 days and 7 nights with Enkidu, and during those days, according to the tablet, Enkidu is transformed. His body changes. He becomes weaker in the wild sense, unable to run with the gazelles as he once did, because the animals now flee from him. His mind changes. He begins to understand human speech. He begins to have thoughts that a wild man would not have. He begins, in the tablet's language, to grow understanding. And then Shamhat takes him to a shepherd's camp, and Enkidu learns to eat bread and drink beer, and to wear clothes, and to use his hands for shepherding rather than for grasping wild fruit. And by the time he reaches Uruk and meets Gilgamesh and wrestles Gilgamesh to a draw in the streets, Enkidu is no longer the wild man he was. He is a civilized being. He has changed his nature. And the tablet, in describing this change, treats it as a specifically human capacity. Enkidu was made by the gods, but the moment he was placed in the human world, he became subject to human transformation. He could be turned, he could become someone else, and the change was not merely cosmetic, it was fundamental. Enkidu at the beginning of the epic and Enkidu at the middle of the epic are two different beings, sharing a name, sharing a body, but not sharing an identity. And this ability to be transformed by circumstances, to be reshaped by relationships and experiences, is what the Sumerians identified as the 8th item on our list. The gods cannot do this. The gods can be moved. The gods can be angered or pleased, but the gods cannot be transformed at the level of nature. Enlil at the beginning of the Atrahasis epic and Enlil at the end of the Atrahasis epic are the same Enlil. He has been through the flood. He has been through the near destruction of humanity. He has been through the reconciliation and the establishment of new rules for the relationship between gods and humans. And yet, at the end of the epic, he is fundamentally the same Enlil he was at the beginning. He is still irritable. He is still authoritative. He is still capable of being pushed to the point of catastrophic response. The experiences did not change him. They passed through him. Compare this to Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh at the beginning of the epic is arrogant, careless, obsessed with fame, contemptuous of ordinary human life. He sleeps with brides on their wedding nights. He challenges strangers to wrestling matches for sport. He pursues heroic feats not for any deep reason, but because he wants to be famous. Gilgamesh at the end of the epic, having lost Enkidu, having failed to find immortality, having returned to Uruk with nothing to show for his journey, is a completely different king. He is humble. He is thoughtful. He is protective of his city. He looks at the walls of Uruk at the end of the 12th tablet, and he sees them with new eyes. He sees them as accomplishments worth preserving. He sees the ordinary life of his people as worth defending. And this change, this transformation from arrogant youth to reflective ruler, is presented in the tablet as the deepest achievement of the epic. It is presented as more important than the killing of Humbaba, more important than the killing of the Bull of Heaven, more important than the journey to Utnapishtim. The most important thing Gilgamesh did was become someone else. And no god in the entire Sumerian corpus ever does this. The tablets have several other examples of the same pattern. There is the character of Adapa, whom we discussed in the context of the first item on the list. Adapa begins as a fisherman and a temple servant. He is skilled with his hands, but he is not particularly wise. Over the course of the story, through his encounter with Anu, through his conversation with Enki, through his choice to refuse immortality, Adapa becomes wise. He becomes, in the tablet's later description, one of the 7 sages, one of the Apkallu. He does not simply gain knowledge. He becomes a different kind of being. He becomes the sage. And this transformation is available to him because he is a human, because human nature is not fixed. Because a human can be one thing at the beginning of a story and another thing at the end, without any inconsistency, without any violation of who the human is. Because who the human is precisely the capacity to become someone new. There is the character of Etana, the shepherd king, whom we also touched on. Etana begins as a young ruler who cannot have a son. His wife is barren. He is desperate. He is not a spiritually developed being at the beginning of the story. He is a man with a problem. But through his encounter with the eagle, through his ascent to heaven on the eagle's back, through his failure and his return, Etana becomes something more than he was. He becomes a king who has seen the earth from above. He becomes a king who has attempted the impossible and failed. He becomes, in the mythological logic of the tablet, the ancestor of a line of kings that will rule for generations. And his transformation is what makes him worthy of being that ancestor, not his birth, not his position, his having become someone new through the experience of the journey. The Sumerian wisdom literature dwells on this ability in a way that is easy to miss if you are reading it too quickly. The proverbs and instructions of the school tradition are full of injunctions to become better, to become wiser, to become more patient, to become more disciplined. These injunctions would be meaningless if the humans they were addressed to did not have the capacity to actually change. And the Sumerians clearly believed the humans had this capacity. The whole educational system of the Sumerian schools was built on the assumption that a young scribe could be shaped over years into a wiser and more skilled adult. And the shaping was not merely the addition of knowledge, it was the transformation of the person. A boy who entered the school at age 8 and left at age 18 was, in the Sumerian understanding, a different person from the boy who had entered. The school had made him someone new. The gods, in the same tablets, are not the objects of educational programs. There are no scribal schools for gods. There are no instructions telling young gods how to become wiser gods. Because the gods, being what they are, cannot be shaped. They can only be. And they are, in the tablets, sometimes admired for their fixed grandeur, but they are also, in the more melancholy passages, pitied for the same fixedness. Because a being that cannot change cannot really grow. And growth, in the Sumerian understanding, is one of the most human things about being human. There is a specific passage in the Instructions of Shuruppak, one of the oldest Sumerian wisdom texts, in which the father Shuruppak addresses his son Ziusudra. Ziusudra will later become the flood survivor in the Sumerian version of the flood story. But in this text, he is a young man being instructed by his father. And Shuruppak, in the instructions, tells his son that a man is not what he is born as. A man is what he becomes. And Shuruppak tells his son that the becoming happens through years of choice, through the daily practice of virtues, through the slow accumulation of habits that eventually add up to a new character. And Shuruppak, in the instructions, is very clear that this is a human privilege. He says something like, "The gods have no such becoming. The gods are what they were on the first day. Only humans can build themselves over time." This is a striking passage, because it inverts the usual religious hierarchy. In most religious traditions, the gods are held up as models of what the humans should aspire to become. But in Shurupak's instructions, the humans are held up as beings who have a specific ability the gods lack. The humans can become. The gods can only be. And the becoming, in the instructions, is more valuable than the being, because the becoming produces something new in the world, and the being simply continues what was already there. The ancient astronaut readers, when they encounter this material, have their own reading. They argue that the Anunnaki, whatever they were, had reached a certain evolutionary or developmental plateau. They had, in the language of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, evolved as far as their genetics or their technology would let them go. And they were stuck. They could not change themselves further. Whatever they had been in, whatever early stage of their development, they were still, in the ancient astronaut reading, essentially the same beings. And this plateau, this evolutionary stall, was one of the reasons they took such interest in the humans. Because the humans, in their creation, had been given a specific quality the Anunnaki no longer had. The humans had been given the capacity to keep developing. The humans could keep changing. The humans could, over generations, evolve in ways the Anunnaki themselves could not. And the Anunnaki, in this reading, were watching the humans partly out of curiosity to see what they would become. Because the humans were doing something the Anunnaki could not do. The humans were an ongoing experiment. The Anunnaki were a finished product. Whether or not you accept the ancient astronaut framing, the Sumerian material makes the case on its own. Humans change, gods do not, and the change is not merely superficial. It is fundamental. A human at 40 is not the same person as the human was at 20. The human has been shaped by experiences. The human has made choices that have narrowed some possibilities and opened others. The human has developed habits that have become character. And the character at 40 is different from the character at 20. And the difference is not a defect. It is the whole point. There is one more layer to this that appears in the later Sumerian material, the idea of transformation as a religious act. In some of the fragmentary temple hymns, there are references to rituals of transformation, in which a person entered the temple as one thing and emerged as another. A young priestess was initiated and became a different being. A king was consecrated and became a different being. A widow, in some rituals, was cleansed of her widowhood and became a different being, available for a new marriage. These rituals, in the Sumerian understanding, were formalizations of a capacity the humans already had. The rituals did not create the capacity. The rituals ceremonially recognized the capacity, because the humans, unlike the gods, could be transformed by ritual. Because the humans, unlike the gods, could be reshaped by ceremony. Because the humans, unlike the gods, had the raw material of a changeable nature to work with. You have this ability. You are, right now, a different person than you were 10 years ago. If you are old enough, and you will be a different person 10 years from now. You cannot stop this. You can direct it, somewhat, by the choices you make, but you cannot stop it. You are a changing being, and the changes are yours to shape, to some degree. And the shaping is the eighth ability. It is the ability to become someone new over the course of a lifetime, without ceasing to be yourself. It is the ability to hold together, across the changes, a continuous sense of who you are, while also becoming genuinely different. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, cannot do this. They cannot become someone new. They can only be who they always were. And who they always were is grand, but it is fixed. And fixed grandeur, in the Sumerian understanding, is a lesser thing than the ongoing development that only mortals possess. Because ongoing development produces novelty. And novelty is what the universe needs. And you, in your ongoing development, are producing novelty every day. You are becoming, and in becoming, you are adding something new to the world. And the gods, static in their eternal being, are watching, and cannot join in, and can only witness what you are turning into. The ninth thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is love someone whose ending you can see. This is different from the fifth item on our list, which was the ability to give your life for another mortal. This ninth ability is the daily version of that same ability, spread across an entire lifetime, expressed not in a single act of sacrifice, but in the sustained work of loving a being that you know is going to end. And the Sumerian tablets treat this as one of the most difficult and one of the most beautiful of the human capacities, because it requires holding two things in your mind at the same time, the love and the ending, and keeping both there and not letting either erase the other. And doing this every day, for years, for decades, for the whole span of a marriage or a friendship or a parenthood. And the gods, in the tablets, cannot do it, because the gods, being immortal, cannot really see the endings of others in the way a mortal can. And because the gods, being infinite, cannot really commit to the specific and finite way that mortal love requires. Consider what it means to love a mortal being. You are, right now, presumably loving someone, a parent, a spouse, a child, a friend, a sibling, a grandparent, someone. And, if you think about it clearly, that this person is going to die. Not maybe, definitely. On some date that is not yet on any calendar, but that will be on a calendar someday. And you are loving them anyway. You are investing your finite time in them. You are opening yourself to them. You are letting them matter to you in a way that will, eventually, cause you pain, because their ending will hurt. And you are doing this deliberately. You are choosing the pain in advance, in exchange for the love. And this choice, this trade of future pain for present love, is one of the most distinctively human things you do. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, cannot make this trade, because the pain, from their perspective, does not have the right shape. And the love, from their perspective, does not have the right terms. The sacred marriage hymns of Inanna and Dumuzi are where this gets its clearest treatment in the corpus. These hymns describe the marriage of the goddess Inanna to the mortal shepherd Dumuzi. And the whole cycle of hymns is haunted by Dumuzi's eventual death. He is going to die. Everyone in the audience of the hymns knows this. Inanna knows this. Dumuzi himself, in some of the hymns, seems to know this. The hymns describe the marriage as beautiful, as passionate, as tender, and they describe it as, in some sense, already shadowed by its ending, because Dumuzi is mortal, because Dumuzi is going to end. And Inanna, in loving him, is loving something that has an ending built into it. And the hymns dwell on this. They dwell on the way Dumuzi's mortality makes his beauty more urgent. They dwell on the way Inanna's love is not diminished by the ending, but is, in some way, intensified by it. Because Dumuzi will not be there forever. And so every moment with Dumuzi is a moment that has to matter now. But Inanna is a goddess, and the hymns are careful to note this. Inanna can love Dumuzi in the mortal way only through a specific effort. She has to descend, in some sense, into the mortal mode of loving. She has to accept the terms of the mortal trade. She has to open herself to a pain that no goddess should have to feel. And when Dumuzi is taken to the underworld, in the myths that follow the sacred marriage cycle, Inanna does experience this pain. She experiences it as an outrage. She experiences it as an injustice. She experiences it, in some passages, as unbearable. And her response, in the tablets, is to try to change the terms. She tries to get Dumuzi back. She tries to make an arrangement in which he is not entirely gone. And she succeeds, partially, in the myth of Dumuzi's alternation with his sister Geshtinana. But the myth is very clear that Inanna's love for Dumuzi is not the same as a mortal woman's love for a mortal husband, because Inanna will still be there, and Dumuzi will not. And Inanna's eternal existence gives her options that a mortal woman does not have. She can bargain with the underworld. She can arrange for the beloved to return, seasonally. She can, in effect, refuse the terms of mortal love. And the myth, in its subtext, notes that this refusal is what makes her love not quite the same as a human love. A human woman, losing her husband, has to accept that he is gone. A goddess, losing her husband, can try to bring him back. And the acceptance in the tablets is what makes the human love complete. The bargaining is what makes the divine love incomplete. There is a passage in one of the lesser-known Dumuzi laments in which Dumuzi's mother, Dutur, mourns her son. Dutur is a goddess. She is described, in the lament, as walking through the reed thickets of the marsh where Dumuzi's body has been left, and she is looking for him, and she cannot find him. And her lament, in the tablet, is beautiful, but it is also, in a way that is easy to miss, a lament of a specific type. It is the lament of a goddess who does not fully accept the ending. She keeps looking. She keeps calling his name. She keeps expecting to find him around the next bend of the reed path. And the tablet, in describing her searching, contrasts it with the searching of mortal mothers who have lost their sons in ordinary human ways. The mortal mothers, in the corpus, are described as searching for a while and then accepting. They visit the burial site. They make offerings. They begin the work of grief. Dutur, being a goddess, cannot begin this work in the same way. She stays in the searching phase. She does not accept the finality, and her love for Dumuzi, in the lament, is thereby locked into a permanent, unresolved condition. It is not that she loves him less than a mortal mother would. It is that her love cannot complete itself in the way a mortal love does, because completion requires acceptance of the ending. And Dutur, as a goddess, cannot accept endings. The tablets are consistent on this pattern. When a god loves a mortal, the god's love is described as intense but incomplete. The god cannot go all the way through the mortal experience of love. The god cannot fully commit to the terms of finitude, and when the mortal dies, the god's grief, if the god has any, is truncated or distorted. It gets stuck in the searching phase, or it gets converted into rage, or it gets displaced onto some other object. It does not resolve the way a mortal grief resolves, over time, into memory and acceptance. And this incompleteness, in the tablets, is what marks the god's love as different from the mortal's love. The mortal, by contrast, can love with full acceptance of the ending. This is not a small ability. It is, in the Sumerian understanding, one of the most difficult things a being can do, because it requires a kind of double vision. You have to see the beloved as they are now, alive, present, breathing, laughing. And you have to see, faintly, at the same time, the beloved as they will be, gone, absent, no longer here. And you have to hold both of these visions together, and you have to keep loving. And you have to keep loving in the specific way that the present moment allows, without either shrinking from the future or trying to change it. This is what the Sumerians called mortal love, and it is the 9th item on our list. There is a Sumerian love song, one of the sacred marriage hymns, in which the singer describes lying in bed with her beloved and listening to him breathe. The passage is very short, only a few lines, and it describes only the sound of the breath. But the sound is described in specific detail, the way the chest rises and falls, the soft catch at the top of the inhale, the slight rasp on the exhale. And the singer, in the tablet, says something like, "I am listening to a music that will end," and then the song moves on. But the line stays with you, if you read it carefully, because the singer is not just listening to her beloved's breath, she is listening to it as a piece of music that has a final note, and she is treating each breath as more precious for that reason. And this attention, this heightening of the present because the future is bounded, is what mortal love is made of. And the gods, in the tablets, cannot generate this heightening, because for them, the future is not bounded. Every breath is one of an infinite series, and an infinite series has no first note and no last note, and so no note is precious. The Sumerians had a word for this heightened attention that mortal love produces. The word is difficult to translate, and again gets rendered in various ways, but it refers to a specific mode of perception in which the perceiver sees the object of perception as simultaneously present and receding, as here, and as going, as available now, and as slipping away. This mode of perception, in the tablets, is described as one of the essential qualities of human love. It is what makes human love different from divine love. It is what makes the mother's gaze at the sleeping child different from the goddess's gaze at the sleeping child. The mother sees the child as here now, and as growing up, and as one day being gone. The goddess sees the child as here now, and only as here now. The goddess cannot see the receding, because there is no receding. For a goddess, there is only continuation. And the tablets, in some of the most subtle passages, suggest that this human capacity for double vision is what makes human love not just different from divine love, but, in some way, deeper. Because the human, in loving with the ending in view, is loving with the full weight of the situation. The human is loving the beloved for who they are, and for the fact that they will not always be. The human is not idealizing the beloved into an eternal object. The human is loving the specific, finite, mortal being that the beloved actually is. And this loving of the specific finite being, the tablets suggest, is what the beloved actually needs. It is what the beloved actually receives when they are truly loved. The beloved is not comforted by being idealized. The beloved is comforted by being seen. And a goddess, looking at a mortal, cannot fully see the mortal, because the goddess cannot integrate the ending into her perception. She sees only the surface, only the current form, only the immortal image of what the mortal is at this moment. And the mortal, in her gaze, is not quite receiving what the mortal needs, whereas the mortal spouse, looking at the same mortal, can see the whole trajectory, can see the ending in the current form, can love the whole being, past, present, and future, as a single, finite entity that is worth loving because it is finite. And this loving of the whole finite entity is what mortal marriage, at its deepest, is made of. And it is what the gods, in the tablets, cannot participate in. Not really, not fully, not with the whole of their being. There is a passage in the Gilgamesh epic that is often quoted for its beauty, and that becomes even more powerful when you read it against this ninth ability. On Tablet 10, when Siduri the tavern keeper is speaking with Gilgamesh, she gives him her famous advice about how to live. And the passage, in most translations, goes something like this. When the gods created humanity, they set aside death for humanity, and life they kept for themselves. So fill your belly, Gilgamesh. Make merry day and night. Turn every day into a feast. Wear fresh clothes, and bathe, and let your head be clean. Look at the child who takes your hand. Delight in the wife whom you embrace. This is the only work of a mortal. That last part is the key. The only work of a mortal. Siduri is saying that the whole assignment of a mortal life is this. Look at the child. Delight in the wife. Do this now, because now is what you have. And the tablet is presenting this not as a consolation for the sadness of mortality. It is presenting it as the specific work that mortals can do that gods cannot. Gods cannot delight in a mortal wife in the way Siduri is describing, because gods cannot see the wife as finite and precious in the way a mortal husband can. Gods cannot look at a child who takes their hand in the way Siduri is describing, because gods do not have the specific finitude that makes the child's small hand into a thing of urgency. The work Siduri is assigning to Gilgamesh is a specifically mortal work, and it is the ninth item on our list, presented as an assignment. Go home, love your wife, delight in your children. Do this daily. Do this until you cannot. Do this with the full knowledge that you will not always be able to do it, because this is what you can do that no god can. This is the work of your kind. This is the labor for which you were made. You are doing this now. If you are loving anyone, you are doing this. And you are doing it, in most cases, without any elaborate philosophical framing. You are simply loving your parent, your spouse, your child, your friend. You are simply being present with them. And in that presence, you are performing the ninth ability. You are loving a being whose ending you can see. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, cannot perform this ability. They can love mortals, in some limited way, but they cannot love them all the way through to their endings. And you, in your love, are going all the way through. You are going to be with the beloved, and you are going to be with the memory of the beloved, and you are going to be with the loss of the beloved, and you are going to be with the slow work of continuing after the loss. And all of this is what your ninth ability enables. All of this is what you are for. And the tablets, when they describe it as the most difficult of the human tasks, and also as the most sacred. The 10th thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is lie to yourself. This is going to sound like a negative ability. In modern moral thinking, self-deception is a vice. It is what people do when they refuse to face the truth. It is what makes possible denial, wishful thinking, unrealistic optimism, and all the other cognitive errors we have been taught to guard against. But the Sumerians, when they wrote about self-deception, did not treat it as a moral failure. They treated it as a distinctive human capacity that, exercised well, produced results that no clear-eyed being could produce. And they identified this capacity as the 10th item on the list. Because gods, in the Sumerian understanding, cannot lie to themselves. Gods know what is true. Gods have access to the tablet of destinies. Gods cannot construct a fiction and then believe the fiction. Their perception is too accurate. Their memory is too complete. Their access to the actual state of affairs is too total. And this accuracy, the tablets suggest, is a limitation, because there are things you can do only if you are able to hold a false belief while acting on it. There are futures you can build only if you are willing to believe, temporarily, that they are already coming to pass. There are versions of yourself you can become only if you are willing to imagine you are already those versions before you are actually them. This is not a common reading of the Sumerian material. Most modern commentators do not describe self-deception as an ability, but when you read the tablets carefully, the pattern is there. The humans, in the tablets, do things that require them to hold false beliefs, and the tablets, in describing these actions, do not condemn the false beliefs. The tablets often treat the false beliefs as necessary components of the actions, and the gods, in the same tablets, are described as unable to hold false beliefs, and therefore as unable to perform the same actions. Consider the case of the young king who thinks he can win a battle he cannot win. The Sumerian corpus is full of such kings. They set out on campaigns that any honest assessment would identify as doomed. They believe they can conquer cities that are too well defended. They believe they can defeat armies that outnumber them. And they set out, and they fight, and they sometimes lose. But sometimes, against all reasonable expectation, they win. And the tablets, in describing these upsets, note that the king's belief in his own success was, in some sense, the necessary condition for the success. The king who could not have believed in his victory could not have fought hard enough to achieve it. The self-deception, in these cases, is the fuel of the accomplishment. And the tablets do not moralize about this. They simply describe it. The king believed, against the evidence, that he could win. And because he believed, he could try. And because he tried, he sometimes did win. And a being who could not believe against the evidence would never have tried. This pattern is not confined to war. It appears throughout the Sumerian corpus in various forms. The farmer who plants in soil that everyone else considers exhausted. The scribe who attempts to translate a text that the older scribes have said cannot be translated. The mother who believes her sick child will recover, and who nurses the child through the illness, and who sometimes is right. In each of these cases, the human is holding a belief that the evidence does not support, and the human is acting on the belief. And the action, sometimes, produces results that the evidence would have said were impossible. And the tablets, when they describe these results, note that the human's willingness to believe against the evidence was, in each case, the pivot. The gods, in the tablets, cannot generate this kind of pivot, because the gods, having access to the actual state of affairs, cannot believe against it. The gods know what the soil will produce, what the text says, whether the child will live. And knowing, they cannot act as if they did not know. Their actions are constrained by their perceptions. And their perceptions, being accurate, do not admit the fictions that would enable the actions the fictions would enable. This is a subtle point, and the Sumerian tablets present it subtly. But the point is there. The gods are, in a specific way, trapped by their own accuracy. And the humans, in a specific way, are freed by their capacity for inaccuracy, because the inaccuracy allows action that accuracy would forbid. There is a passage in the fragmentary Adapa myth, which we have returned to several times, that touches on this in a strange way. Adapa, when he stands before Anu, is holding a false belief. He believes, on Enki's instructions, that the food Anu is offering him is the food of death. It is not. It is the food of life. And Adapa, holding the false belief, refuses the food, and loses his chance at immortality. And the tablet, at first reading, seems to be about the tragedy of self-deception. Adapa was deceived, Adapa lost the prize, Adapa should have known better. But there is another reading. In the other reading, Enki knew what Adapa would refuse. Enki set up the false belief in order to produce a specific outcome. And the outcome, in this reading, is that Adapa remains mortal. And Adapa, being mortal, remains capable of the 10 previous items on this list. He remains capable of dying, of forgetting, of aging, of rebelling, of sacrificing, of hoping, of grieving, of changing, of loving mortals. He remains a full human. And if he had accepted the food of life, he would have become like Utnapishtim. He would have joined the ranks of the exceptional humans, who were granted immortality, and he would have lost the 10 previous abilities. He would have become, in effect, less than he was. And so Enki's deception, in this reading, was actually a gift. It was a gift of continued mortality. It was a gift of continued access to the full human condition. And Adapa, when he returns to Eridu, may not know it, but he has been given back everything that mattered. He has been given back the capacity for all the 10 previous items, and the 11th, which we will come to shortly. Because he still can die. He still can grieve. He still can love. And the gods, in their attempted gift of immortality, would have taken all of that away. This is an ancient astronaut reading of the Adapa myth, and it is not the only one, but it fits with the pattern of the 10th item. Because the 10th item is about the capacity to hold beliefs that are not true and to act on those beliefs. And the gods, in this reading, use the human capacity for self-deception as a tool for keeping the humans human. Enki knows that Adapa will believe the false story about the food, and Enki relies on Adapa's willingness to believe. And Adapa, in believing, does exactly what Enki wanted him to do. And the result is that Adapa remains capable of everything that makes a human, because a being who could not believe false things could not have avoided the food of life. Only a being who could believe false things could have refused. And so the capacity for self-deception, in this reading, is what preserved Adapa's humanity. The Sumerian wisdom literature has several passages that touch on this. The Instructions of Shuruppak, again, has a line that is often mistranslated but that reads more accurately as something like this: "A man who can convince himself of what is not can achieve what is not yet." The line is enigmatic in modern editions, and translators have struggled with it, but the meaning, if you read it in context with the other Sumerian material, is that the capacity to hold false beliefs, in specific ways and for specific purposes, is what enables the human to achieve things that do not yet exist. Because to achieve something that does not exist, you have to be able to imagine it already existing. You have to be able to inhabit, mentally, a world in which the thing you are trying to make is already made. And this inhabiting, this act of pretending your goal is already achieved, is a form of self-deception. And it is a form of self-deception that the gods, being unable to hold false beliefs, cannot perform. And it is a form of self-deception that the humans, being able to hold false beliefs, perform constantly. Think of the Sumerian architects who designed the ziggurats. They had to hold, in their minds, a picture of the completed ziggurat before the first brick was laid. They had to see it, in their imagination, as if it were already standing. And they had to hold that vision, and communicate it, and organize their workers around it, and defend it against every skeptic who said it could not be done. The architects were, in a specific sense, deceived. They believed in something that was not there. And their belief, held against the current state of affairs, was what made possible the actual construction of the ziggurats. Because construction requires a belief in the final form, and the final form does not exist until construction is complete. And so the architects were, throughout the years of construction, holding a false belief. They were behaving as if a thing that did not exist did exist. And their behavior, over time, made the thing exist. The gods, in the Sumerian tablets, do not build ziggurats. They inspire the building of ziggurats, and they receive the completed ziggurats as offerings, but they do not perform the actual work of construction, because the actual work requires the capacity to believe in something that is not yet real, and the gods cannot believe in something that is not yet real. They see too clearly. They know what is and what is not. They cannot inhabit the intermediate state in which the ziggurat is both not yet and already, and in which the workers proceed as if the already were more real than the not yet. This intermediate state, this productive fiction, is a human territory, and the gods can only receive the results of it, they cannot enter it themselves. This is the 10th item on the list. Humans can lie to themselves. And in lying to themselves, they can build things, create things, imagine things, become things that no clear-eyed being could ever produce. This is not, in the Sumerian understanding, a defect of the human mind. It is a productive feature. It is what makes possible the arts, the crafts, the sciences, the religions, the philosophies. All of these are, in a specific sense, sustained fictions. They are ways of behaving as if certain things are true that cannot be proven true. And they produce, over time, actual results in the world. The temple, once believed in, is built. The city, once imagined, is populated. The story, once told as if it were history, becomes the founding narrative of a people. And all of this depends on the human capacity for self-deception. And the gods, in the tablets, cannot participate in it. They can only watch it happen, and accept the offerings that result from it, and admire, in a way that is not always articulated, the strange productive fictions that the humans keep generating and living inside of. There is another way to think about this that may make it more accessible. The gods, in the Sumerian understanding, live in reality. They live in what is. The humans live, in part, in what could be. And what could be is a fiction, at any given moment, because it has not yet become what is. And the humans, in inhabiting what could be, are inhabiting a fiction, and the fiction, as they inhabit it, sometimes converts itself into what is. And when it converts, the fiction disappears, but the results remain. And the results are what the humans call civilization. Civilization, in this framing, is the accumulated residue of human fictions that have been inhabited long enough to become real, and no god ever contributed to it in the fundamental way that the humans did, because the gods could not inhabit the fictions. The gods could only see reality, and reality, at any given moment, does not contain the next moment of civilization. The next moment has to be dreamed into being, and the dreaming is a form of self-deception, and the self-deception is what humans are for. There is one more layer to this that is worth mentioning. The tablets have several passages in which humans are described as capable of forgiving themselves for things that a god could not forgive. And the forgiveness, in these passages, is a specific form of self-deception. The human, having done something wrong, tells themselves a story about the wrongdoing that softens it. The human explains it to themselves in a way that makes it bearable. The human, in effect, edits the memory of the wrongdoing to make continued life possible. And this editing, this productive revision of the past, is what makes it possible for the human to continue after having done wrong. Without the editing, the human would be crushed by every wrong they had ever committed. With the editing, the human can continue. And the editing is, in a specific sense, a lie. It is a story about the past that is not entirely true, and the human, in telling it, is deceiving themselves. But the deception, in this case, is what allows the human to keep functioning. And a god, being unable to deceive itself, cannot forgive itself in this way. A god, having done wrong, has to continue carrying the full weight of the wrong forever. And there is no editing, and no relief. And the gods, in the tablets, are described as being weighed down by the full weight of their own accumulated errors, without any of the softening that self-deception provides. This is one of the reasons the gods, in the Sumerian material, are described as tired. They have not been able to lie to themselves about anything they have done, and so they have carried every mistake at full weight, forever. And the weight has accumulated, and there is no relief in sight. You have the 10th ability. You lie to yourself in small ways every day. You tell yourself stories about who you are, what you have done, why things happened the way they did. Some of these stories are more accurate than others. Some of them are, in a strict sense, false. But they enable you to keep functioning. They enable you to continue loving people you have hurt. They enable you to keep working on projects that a strict accounting would suggest are doomed. They enable you to imagine futures that are not yet real and then to work toward them. And this whole apparatus of productive self-deception is the 10th ability. And the gods, in the Sumerian tablets, cannot use it. And they envy you for it. And they built you, in one reading, specifically to have it. Because without it, no civilization could ever have been built. And they wanted civilization. And they could not build it themselves. And they needed a species that could dream, and could believe its dreams, and could work as if the dreams were already real. And so they made you, and they gave you the capacity to lie to yourself. And in giving it, they gave you the whole machinery of human creativity. The 11th thing you can do that no god can do, according to the Sumerian tablets, is bury your dead with ritual. This is the item on the list that the Sumerians thought was the deepest. This is the item that gets the most attention in the surviving corpus. This is the item that, when you read it carefully, turns out to encompass all of the previous 10. Because burial with ritual is the act in which the human uses everything it has, everything on the previous list, to do a specific thing that no other kind of being does. And when the tablet lays out this 11th item, it does so with the kind of care that suggests the scribes considered it the culmination, the thing all the others were building toward. The final, most human, most impossible for gods thing that a human can do, consider what burial with ritual actually involves. It involves the physical handling of a corpse. It involves the specific gestures of preparation. It involves the digging of a hole in the ground, or the construction of a tomb, or the arrangement of a pyre. It involves the placing of objects with the body. It involves the speaking of words over the body. It involves the gathering of a community around the body. It involves the singing of songs, the making of offerings, the pouring of libations. It involves, in the Sumerian tradition, the placement of specific grave goods with specific meanings, chosen by the family, that represent the life of the deceased. It involves the marking of the grave, the visiting of the grave, the maintenance of the memory over years and decades. All of this is what burial with ritual is. And all of this is what the humans, in the Sumerian tablets, do that the gods cannot do. The gods cannot do it because the gods have no dead. There are no divine cemeteries in the Sumerian corpus. There are no divine funerals. There are no divine graves. When gods die in the tablets, and some of them do, temporarily, their deaths are handled by other gods in ways that do not involve ritual. Tiamat is killed by Marduk, and her body is split to form the heavens and the earth. There is no funeral for Tiamat. There is a repurposing. Apsu is killed by Ea, and his body becomes the fresh water deep beneath the earth. There is no funeral for Apsu. There is a transformation. Kingu is killed, and his blood is used to make the humans. There is no funeral for Kingu. There is only the taking of his substance for other purposes. And this is the pattern throughout the divine corpus. When gods end, they are used. Their bodies become raw material for other cosmic constructions. Their memory does not receive the specific attention that mortal memory receives. Because for gods, ending is a transition. It is not a completion. And a transition does not require ritual. A completion does. The Sumerian burial practices were among the most elaborate in the ancient world. The archaeological record from the royal tombs of Ur, excavated by Sir Leonard Woolley in the 1920s and 30s, contains some of the most extraordinary evidence of ritual burial ever recovered. The Queen's grave, containing the body of Puabi, dates from around 2,500 years before the Common Era. She was buried with gold jewelry, with a headdress of gold leaves and lapis lazuli, with a lyre inlaid with the head of a bull, with cosmetic containers, with weapons, with musical instruments, and with the bodies of dozens of attendants who had been buried with her, apparently voluntarily, to accompany her into the afterlife. And around her body, the attendants were arranged in specific positions, holding specific objects, dressed in specific clothes. Everything about the burial was ritualized. Nothing was random. The entire structure of the tomb was an assertion, in physical form, that the queen's ending was worth honoring in a specific and elaborate way. And the honoring, in the Sumerian understanding, was not just for the queen. It was for the community. It was for the gods, who received it as an offering. And it was, most subtly, for the future, which would learn from the tomb what the queen had been. Now, the Queen of Ur was an exceptional case. Most Sumerians were not buried with dozens of attendants and pounds of gold. But even the ordinary Sumerian burials, the burials of farmers and scribes and craftsmen and merchants, had ritual elements. The body was washed. The body was wrapped. The body was placed in a specific position. Grave goods were included, even if only small clay figurines or ceramic vessels or personal items. Words were spoken. Offerings were made. The community gathered. And after the burial, the family continued to visit the grave, to bring offerings, to speak the name of the deceased, to include the deceased in the family memory for as long as the family remembered them. This was the standard practice. And it was universal, or as close to universal as we can tell from the surviving evidence. The gods, in the same corpus, are not shown participating in these rituals in any real sense. The gods receive offerings, yes. The offerings that are made at the grave are notionally directed to the gods, or to the spirits of the underworld, and the gods receive them and are pleased or displeased. But the gods do not perform the rituals themselves. The gods do not bury each other. The gods do not gather around the bodies of their dead, because there are no bodies. There is no dying in the specific mortal way, and so there is no burial. And the whole vast machinery of Sumerian burial practice, with its washing and its wrapping and its offerings and its songs and its grave goods, is a human production. It is what the humans do. And it is what the gods, in the tablets, cannot do. There is a passage in the Gilgamesh epic, on tablet 8, that describes the funeral of Enkidu. Gilgamesh, after his 7 days of vigil over Enkidu's body, finally releases the body for burial, and the tablet describes the burial in specific detail. Gilgamesh commissions statues of Enkidu to be placed in various locations to preserve Enkidu's memory. Gilgamesh distributes objects from Enkidu's possessions to various gods and spirits as offerings on Enkidu's behalf. Gilgamesh calls together the craftsmen of Uruk and orders them to make specific ritual objects. Gilgamesh, in the tablet, spares no expense. He is doing everything he can to honor his friend's ending, and the tablet lingers on the details of what he does. It lingers on the specific pieces of lapis lazuli that are placed with the body. It lingers on the specific offerings made to specific gods. It lingers on the words Gilgamesh speaks. And the whole passage is a portrait of a human being using every resource he has to perform the 11th ability, to honor a death with ritual, to take a specific ending and to surround it with meaning. And the gods, in the tablet, receive the offerings, but they do not perform any ritual of their own. They stand at the receiving end of the ritual. They are its addressees, but they cannot originate it. They cannot generate the ritual out of their own condition, because the ritual, in its essence, is the response of a finite being to another finite being's ending. And the gods, being infinite, have no finite endings of their own to respond to. And even when they witness a mortal ending, they cannot generate the specifically ritual response. They can only receive the ritual that the humans generate. This is a subtle point, but a crucial one. The tablets are clear that ritual is a human production, not a divine one. The gods are the recipients of ritual, but not its makers. And this is because ritual requires a specific interior condition that only mortals have. It requires the sense that this ending matters. It requires the sense that this specific finite being, now gone, was worth surrounding with specific attention. It requires the willingness to use one's own scarce time on the honoring of another's ending. And all of these requirements are human requirements. They are the emotional and cognitive prerequisites for ritual. And the gods, in the Sumerian understanding, do not have them. There is a specific quality to Sumerian burial practice that deserves attention. The Sumerians buried their dead not just with grave goods, but with what archaeologists have called cylinder seals. These were small, carved stone cylinders, engraved with images and inscriptions that the deceased had used during their lives to mark documents and to identify themselves in business transactions. When rolled across wet clay, they left a distinctive imprint that functioned as a signature. And when the deceased was buried, the cylinder seal was often placed with the body. And the reasoning behind this practice, in the Sumerian understanding, was that the seal represented the deceased's identity. It represented the specific way the deceased had marked the world during their life. And burying it with the body was a way of saying that this identity, this specific marking of the world, was worth preserving with the body. The identity was not to be reused. It was to be honored and closed, along with the body. The seal, in effect, was retired at the time of burial, and the retirement was a ritual acknowledgement that this specific person had lived, had made their mark, had done their work, and was now finished. The seal, going into the ground with the body, was a way of saying, this life had a shape, and the shape is now complete, and the completion is worth honoring. The gods, in the tablets, have no cylinder seals. They have symbols, they have emblems, they have specific forms, but these are not the same as cylinder seals. A cylinder seal is a specific mark that identifies a specific finite being. It is small, personal, portable. It is used in daily transactions. It becomes worn from use. It carries the specific pressure of the specific hand that has held it. And when the being that used it dies, the seal is buried with the being. And there is no more marking. And this whole practice is deeply and specifically human, because it depends on the fact that a specific finite being had a specific mark that they made on the world for a specific period of time, and that the making of the mark is now complete, and that the completion is worth ritualizing. The Sumerian tablets are full of references to burial with cylinder seals. The archaeological record is full of the seals themselves, recovered from graves. And the practice was so widespread, so consistent across centuries, that it forms one of the most distinctive features of Sumerian material culture. And it is a practice that has no divine equivalent. There is no divine cylinder seal that is buried with a dead god, because no god dies in the specifically mortal way, and no god's identity is finite in the specifically mortal way that makes retirement of the seal meaningful. The gods, being immortal, keep their symbols forever. The humans, being mortal, retire their seals at death, and the retirement is one of the deepest expressions of the 11th ability. The Sumerian understanding of what happens to the dead is also worth considering here. The dead, in the Sumerian corpus, do not simply cease to exist. They go to the underworld, to the house of Ereshkigal, where they exist in a diminished form. They eat clay. They wear garments of feathers. They sit in the dust, and they are ruled by Ereshkigal, and they are visited on rare occasions by the living, and they receive offerings that the living make to them. And this whole afterlife economy is sustained by the ritual practices of the living. The offerings, the visits, the maintenance of the memory are what keep the dead in a certain condition in the underworld. Without these ritual maintenances, the dead sink deeper into oblivion. They become more diminished. They lose more of what they were. And with the ritual maintenances, they retain a certain minimum of dignity and identity in the underworld. And this maintenance, this ongoing ritual work performed by the living for the dead, is one of the fundamental religious activities of Sumerian culture. And it is a specifically human activity. The gods do not perform it. The gods receive some of the offerings, in their capacity as underworld deities, but they do not maintain their own dead, because they have no dead of their own to maintain. And so the entire vast apparatus of Sumerian afterlife maintenance is a human production, from beginning to end. It is what the humans do for their dead, and it is what the gods watch, and receive some benefit from, but cannot originate on their own. There is a beautiful passage in one of the Sumerian mortuary hymns in which the priest, addressing the deceased, describes the ritual of burial as a form of second creation. The first creation, in the hymn, was the making of the deceased at birth by the gods out of clay and divine breath. The second creation, in the hymn, is the burial. And the burial is described as the humans, using their own hands, giving the deceased a new form. The new form is a form of memory. The new form is the deceased as they will be remembered, as they will be honored, as they will be preserved in the community's ongoing awareness. And this second creation, in the hymn, is described as an act that the gods cannot perform, because the gods did not know the deceased in the specific way that the community knew them. The gods know the deceased in the aggregate, as one of many, as a general instance of humanity. The community knows the deceased as a specific being, with specific traits, with specific relationships, with specific accomplishments and failures. And the community, in performing the burial, is creating a version of the deceased that the gods themselves cannot make, because the gods do not have the specific knowledge required. Only the community has it. And the community, in the burial, is using its specific knowledge to give the deceased a second form, a form of memory, a form of ongoing presence in the ritual life of the community. And this form, this second creation, is the 11th item on our list, expressed at its full depth. It is the human act of making a specific finite being persist in specific ways after that being has ended. And no god can do this, because no god has the specific knowledge required, and no god has the finite time to spend on the maintenance of the specific memory. There is one more layer to this that appears in the fragmentary tablets from the very end of the Sumerian period. As Sumer was being absorbed into the Akkadian and then Babylonian empires, and as the Sumerian language was becoming a scholarly language rather than a spoken one, there was a period of anxiety about whether the Sumerian dead would still be properly honored under the new cultural conditions. And several of the last Sumerian tablets that we have are, in effect, requests to the future. Requests that the Sumerian names still be spoken. Requests that the Sumerian ancestors still receive offerings. Requests that the whole apparatus of Sumerian ritual burial be preserved even as the Sumerian world itself passed away. And these requests, taken as a group, form one of the most poignant documents in the ancient world, because they show the Sumerians recognizing that their entire civilization was ending, and asking, in advance, that the specific ritual work of remembering the dead be continued after them. And the requests were, in some cases, granted. Some of the Sumerian names are still spoken today, by scholars reading the tablets and by ancient astronaut enthusiasts writing about the Anunnaki. And in this ongoing attention to the specific Sumerian names, the 11th ability continues to operate. The dead of Sumer, 4,500 years after their deaths, are still being honored. Their names are still being said. Their tablets are still being read. And this honoring is a form of the 11th ability, extended across millennia, sustained by the specific finite beings who continue to care about the specific finite beings who came before. And the gods, in the tablets, cannot participate in this. They can only witness. They can only receive whatever offerings are made, but they cannot originate the honoring. The honoring is what the humans do, and it is what the gods, watching from wherever they watch from, envy. You have this ability. You will use it, probably several times, over the course of your life. You will bury a parent. You will bury a spouse, or be buried by one. You will bury a friend. You will bury, eventually, aspects of yourself that end before the rest of you does. And in each of these burials, you will perform the 11th ability. You will take an ending, and you will surround it with ritual, and you will make the ending mean something. And the meaning you make will be specific to you and to the being you are burying. And no god, in the Sumerian tablets, could make this specific meaning, because the meaning requires specific finite knowledge of specific finite beings. And the gods do not have specific finite anything. They have universal infinities. And universal infinities cannot make specific finite meanings. This is the deepest of the 11 abilities. This is the one the Sumerian scribes considered the summit. Because in performing this ability, the human uses everything else on the list. The human uses their capacity to die, because burial is the response to death. The human uses their capacity to forget, because ritual is what allows forgetting to happen without erasure. The human uses their capacity to age, because burial is what the aged do for their peers. The human uses their capacity to rebel against creation, because burial is the human's insistence that the Creator's assignment of mortality does not have the last word. The human uses their capacity to sacrifice for another mortal, because ritual is a form of ongoing small sacrifice, of time and effort, on behalf of the dead. The human uses their capacity to hope, because ritual is grounded in the hope that the dead can still be reached. The human uses their capacity to grieve, because burial is the ritualized form of grief. The human uses their capacity to change their nature, because participating in burial changes the participant. The human uses their capacity to love someone whose ending they can see, because burial is what that love ultimately becomes. And the human uses their capacity to lie to themselves, because ritual involves acting as if the dead can still hear, and the acting as if is the productive fiction that makes the ritual meaningful. All of the previous 10 abilities are gathered up in the 11th into a single sustained act of honoring and ending. And the 11th, therefore, is not just an ability. It is the summation of all the abilities. It is the fullest expression of what a human being can do that no god can. There is something worth adding here about the archaeology, because the physical evidence of Sumerian burial practice has a specific quality that reinforces everything the tablets say. When Woolley excavated the royal cemetery at Ur, and when later archaeologists excavated the burial grounds at Nippur, Kish, Lagash, Girsu, Uruk, and the other Sumerian sites, they found a consistent pattern. The pattern was this: the Sumerians buried their dead with items that were personal, not just valuable, personal. A scribe was buried with his stylus. A weaver was buried with her spindle. A farmer was buried with a small model plow. A brewer was buried with a small ceramic jug of the type she had used in her work. And these personal items were, in each case, worn from use. They had been the actual tools of the actual life of the actual person being buried. And their inclusion in the grave was a way of saying that the person's specific work, their specific way of participating in the world, was worth burying with them, was worth acknowledging in the ritual, was worth carrying with them into whatever came next. The gods, if they had graves, would not have graves like this, because the gods do not have specific work in the way humans have specific work. Enlil does not have a specific tool that he uses in his role as storm god. He is the storm. He does not need a tool. Enki does not have a specific stylus that he uses in his role as god of wisdom. He is the wisdom. He does not need a stylus. The gods are their functions, and their functions do not require the tools that make human work possible. And so a divine grave, if such a thing existed, would be empty of the personal items that make human graves so specific. It would contain, at most, the emblems of the god's function: a crown, a scepter, a weapon. And these emblems would not be personal in the way the scribe's stylus is personal. They would not be worn from specific use. They would be, in effect, images of divine power rather than tools of divine labor. And this difference between the personal specificity of human graves and the emblematic generality of divine grave emblems is one of the deepest expressions of the difference between the mortal and the divine mode of existence. The Sumerian archaeologists have also noted that the burial goods were often organized in specific ways relative to the body. A cup near the hand, positioned as if the deceased were about to drink. A tool near the working hand, positioned as if the deceased were about to use it. A piece of jewelry on the body, in the specific position it would have occupied in life. These placements were not accidental. They were deliberate. They were, in effect, a positioning of the dead as if the dead were about to resume the specific gestures of their specific life. And this positioning was ritualized. It was part of what burial with ritual meant. It was a way of preserving, at the moment of interment, the specific patterns of the specific life that had ended. And this preservation, this careful arrangement of tools around the body, was another expression of the 11th ability. It was the humans, using their specific knowledge of the deceased's specific patterns, making the burial into a portrait of the life. And no god could have done this, because no god had access to the specific patterns. Only the family, only the community, only the specific finite beings who had known the deceased in specific finite ways had the knowledge required to arrange the burial as a portrait. And they used their knowledge, and the arrangement they produced was, for 4,000 years, preserved in the ground, and when the archaeologists uncovered it, they were able to read, in the arrangement of the tools around the bones, the specific patterns of a specific finite life that had ended millennia ago. And this reading, itself, is a continuation of the 11th ability. The archaeologists, in reading the grave, are performing, in their own way, the honoring that the original mourners performed. And they are extending the ritual across the centuries into our present. And this is where the 11 items on our list, taken together, land. They land here. They land in the specific finite acts of specific finite beings, honoring other specific finite beings across time. The gods, in the tablets, cannot participate in this. The gods can only watch. The gods can only receive whatever offerings are made in their name. But the actual work, the actual honoring, the actual preservation of specific finite lives in specific finite acts of ritual and memory is what the humans do. And it is what the humans have been doing, according to the tablets, since the very beginning. Since Enki mixed the blood of the rebellious god into the clay of the Abzu and shaped the first beings, since those first beings looked at each other and saw, for the first time, another finite being worth loving and worth grieving and worth burying with ritual. Since that first moment, the 11 abilities have been operating. And they are still operating. And they will keep operating for as long as there are humans to operate them. And the tablets, when they close their treatment of the 11 items, close with a specific observation. The observation is that the 11 items, taken together, are what the gods needed. They are what the gods designed the humans for. They are the specific capacities that had to exist in the universe, and that could not exist in any divine being, and that therefore required a new kind of being to be created to house them. The humans, in this reading, are not defective gods. They are not lesser beings. They are the beings the gods needed to make, because the gods themselves could not do these 11 things. And in making the humans, the gods gave the universe access to these 11 abilities, and the universe, having these abilities, could produce things it could not otherwise have produced: civilization, art, poetry. The specific finite meanings of specific finite lives. The whole rich fabric of human culture, in all its variety and depth, was made possible by the 11 abilities, and the 11 abilities were installed in the humans, according to the tablets, at the moment of the humans' creation, and they have been the distinctive features of the human condition ever since. And the ancient astronaut readers, when they encounter this closing, have their own reading of it. They argue that the Anunnaki, having created the humans with these 11 abilities, eventually withdrew from active management of the human world. And they argue that the withdrawal was, in part, an acknowledgement that the humans were doing something the Anunnaki could not do. and that the humans should therefore be left to do it. The humans were building the world the Anunnaki could not build. The humans were making the meanings the Anunnaki could not make. And so the Anunnaki, in this reading, stepped back. They let the humans take over, and they became, in effect, the distant witnesses that the tablets sometimes describe them as. They watched, from wherever they went, as the humans continued to exercise the 11 abilities across the millennia. And they were, in this reading, satisfied, because their creation was doing what it was made to do. Their creation was performing the 11 acts, and the 11 acts were producing the specific finite meanings that the universe needed and that the gods themselves could not generate. So what do you do with all of this? You have watched a 3-hour video walking through 11 things a human being can do that no god in the Sumerian tablets can do. The list, at the end, looks like this. You can die, you can forget, you can age, you can rebel against your creator, you can sacrifice yourself for another mortal, you can hope in the absence of evidence, you can grieve, you can change your nature, you can love someone whose ending you can see, you can lie to yourself, and you can bury your dead with ritual. 11 items, 11 capacities, 11 things that make you, in the Sumerian understanding, a specific kind of being that has never existed in the universe before your kind was made, and that the gods, however powerful they were, could not perform themselves. The temptation, at the end of a video like this, is to draw a large lesson, to say that this means you should live your life a certain way, to say that this means you should value certain things more than you currently value them. And there is something to that temptation, because the tablets, when you read them all the way through, do gesture toward a certain kind of life, a life in which the 11 abilities are exercised with attention, a life in which you know what you are for, a life in which you understand that your finitude is not a defect, but a feature, a life in which you understand that the specific weight of each hour you spend is what makes the hour worth spending. And this understanding, once you have it, changes some things about how you might approach the ordinary decisions of ordinary days. But the tablets do not, in the end, prescribe. The tablets describe. They tell you what you can do that no god can, and they leave it to you to decide what to do with the information. And this leaving it to you is itself an acknowledgement of the fourth ability. You are capable of rebellion. You are capable of refusing what your creator suggests. You are capable of taking this list and putting it away and never thinking about it again. And you are also capable of taking it and letting it shape the rest of your life. Both options are available to you. And the tablets do not weigh in. They only report. If you take the ancient astronaut framing seriously, the tablets are a kind of legacy document. They are what the Anunnaki left behind when they withdrew from active management of human affairs. They are, in effect, an instruction manual, not for how to worship, not for how to sacrifice, for how to be human, for how to use the 11 abilities that you were given at the moment of your creation. And the instruction manual, if you read it carefully, comes down to this. Use the abilities. Do not waste them. Do not pretend you do not have them. Do not act in your daily life as if you were an immortal being with infinite time. You are not. You have a finite allotment. And within the finite allotment, you have 11 distinct capacities that no other kind of being in the universe possesses. Use them. Use them well. And when you use them well, you will produce in the specific finite arena of your specific finite life, the kind of meaning that the gods themselves could never produce. And this meaning, however small, however local, however easily forgotten by history, will have been worth producing, because it is what you were for. The Sumerian tablets, taken as a whole, are not a happy document. They describe a difficult world in which humans struggle with hunger and disease and warfare and betrayal and loss. They do not sugarcoat the human condition. They do not pretend that the 11 abilities make human life easy. They actually acknowledge, in many places, that the 11 abilities make human life difficult in specific ways. Because a being who can grieve will grieve. A being who can love someone whose ending they can see will lose the beloved and will suffer. A being who can hope in the absence of evidence will hope for things that will not happen and will be disappointed. All of the 11 abilities carry, along with their productive power, a specific kind of cost. And the cost is paid by the being that has the ability. There is no free lunch in the Sumerian understanding of the human condition. Everything has its price. But the tablets also make clear that the price is worth paying. They make clear that the alternative, the divine mode of existence, in which none of the 11 abilities operate, is not, in the tablet's view, a preferable mode. The gods are not held up as models. The gods are held up as beings with certain powers and certain limitations. And their limitations, the tablets suggest, are worse than the humans' limitations. Because the humans' limitations at least allow the 11 abilities to operate, and the gods' limitations do not. There is one more thing worth saying, because it comes out of the ancient astronaut reading of this material in a way that touches on the present. The ancient astronaut readers argue that the Anunnaki, when they left, did not entirely leave. They argue that some form of presence remained, and they argue that this presence has been observing, over the millennia, how well or how badly the humans have used the 11 abilities. And they argue that the checklist of the 7 resets that we mentioned earlier, that document that is linked below, includes an assessment of whether the humans have been living up to the 11 abilities. Because the resets, in the ancient astronaut framework, were not random. They were, in effect, judgments. And the judgments were based, in significant part, on how the humans were exercising the 11 capacities, whether they were dying with dignity, whether they were grieving properly, whether they were burying their dead with ritual, whether they were loving mortals in the mortal way. All of these were, in the ancient astronaut reading, criteria in the divine assessment. And when the humans failed too many of the criteria, the reset came. And after the reset, a new generation of humans was given another chance. And this cycle has, according to the framework, run 7 times. And an 8th reset is, according to the checklist, currently pending. Whether or not you accept the framework, the 11 abilities are worth thinking about in their own right, because they are, in a straightforward way, the abilities you actually have. Whatever their origin, whatever their metaphysical status, they are the things you can do. And the exercising of them is what constitutes your daily life. Every day, you die a little bit, because every day carries you closer to the horizon. Every day, you forget some of what happened, because your mind cannot hold everything. Every day, you age, because time is passing through your body. Every day, you have small opportunities to rebel against various authorities, and you take some of them and refuse others. Every day, you make small sacrifices for other people, in ways you probably do not notice. Every day, you hope for things you cannot verify. Every day, you grieve, at least a little, for things and people you have lost. Every day, you change, in tiny ways, into a slightly different person. Every day, you love someone whose ending you can see, and every day, the love does its work in you. Every day, you lie to yourself, at least a little, about who you are and what you have done and why. And every day, or with some regularity, you engage with the memory of the dead, whether at graves or in conversations or in the daily practices of your family. All of the 11 abilities are being exercised right now in your life, whether or not you have been thinking of them in these terms. And the tablets, if they are to be believed, are watching. Not necessarily the gods themselves, not necessarily the Anunnaki, but something. The tablets themselves, the tradition that produced them, the long line of scribes and priests and readers and viewers who have carried the material forward across the millennia, all of these constitute a kind of ongoing witness, a witness to what the humans are doing with the 11 abilities. And you, sitting there watching this video, are now part of that witness. You have received the material, and you are, in some small way, responsible for what you do with it now that you have it. The Sumerians would not have expected you to do anything grand. They were realistic about the ordinary scale of ordinary lives. They knew that most humans would not become kings or sages or heroes. Most humans would live small lives, in small houses, doing small tasks, loving small circles of people. And this was, in the Sumerian understanding, entirely fine. The 11 abilities can be exercised at any scale. You do not need to be Gilgamesh to grieve for a friend. You do not need to be Adapa to refuse the terms of a divine bargain. You do not need to be Enkidu to sacrifice for someone you love. The 11 abilities are available to every human, at every scale, in every context, and their exercise, in ordinary lives, is what produces the ongoing meaning that the gods themselves cannot produce. So the takeaway at the end of this video is not to become someone extraordinary. It is to become a full version of the ordinary person you already are. To let the 11 abilities operate in you without shame, without hesitation, without pretending that you do not have them, or that you should not use them. To die well when the time comes, and until then, to live in a way that acknowledges that dying is coming. To forget what you need to forget in order to keep going. To age gracefully or ungracefully, but to age and to let the aging be visible, to rebel against the parts of your life that are not worth accepting in whatever small ways you can, to sacrifice in small daily ways for the people you love, to hope, even when hope seems foolish, to grieve when grief is called for, and to let the grief take the time it needs, to change into whatever you are becoming without resisting the change out of a wish to stay the same, to love the mortal beings around you, knowing they will end, to lie to yourself productively in the ways that let you keep dreaming, and, when the time comes, to bury your dead with ritual, and, eventually, to be buried by someone else who loves you with ritual in the specific finite way that only mortals can be honored. The tablets say this is what you are for. They say, at the end, that if you do these 11 things, you will have done what only your kind can do. You will have used your specific finite existence to produce the specific finite meanings that the universe needs and that only your kind can produce. And you will have done what the gods themselves, in all their power, could not do. And this, in the Sumerian understanding, is enough. This is what a life is for. This is the answer to the question that the tablets, in their oldest layers, were asking. What is a human being? A human being, according to the tablets, is a being who can do these 11 things. And a life well lived is a life in which these 11 things are done well. That is all. That is everything. That is the entire teaching of the oldest tablets in the oldest libraries of the oldest cities of the world. Do the 11 things. Do them well. Do them until you cannot do them anymore. And then, when you are done, someone else will do the 11th one for you. And the whole cycle will continue, as it has continued for as long as there have been humans, as it will continue for as long as humans continue to exist. The tablet is on the shelf. The clay is dry. The cuneiform is legible. The message has been received. What you do with it now is entirely up to you. The 11 abilities are yours to exercise or to ignore. The choice, as the fourth ability makes clear, is one you actually get to make. And whichever way you choose, the tablets have already 4,000 years in advance laid out the terms. The terms are these. You are a specific finite being, made for specific finite work. The work is these 11 items. Do it or do not do it. But know, either way, that the possibility was in you from the beginning. It is what your kind is for. It is what the gods in the tablets could not do themselves, and what they made you to do in their place. And they are watching or they are not, and they care or they do not. But you are here, and the 11 abilities are yours. And each day carries you closer to the horizon. And what you do between now and the horizon is your specific finite contribution to the world that the tablets described. That is the end of the list. That is the end of the tablet. That is the end of this video. But it is not, of course, the end of the story, because you are still here. And the 11 abilities are still operating in you. And whatever you do next, in whatever ordinary or extraordinary way you do it, will be a small addition to the accumulated record of what your kind has done with the gifts it was given. And the record, however imperfect, is what the tablets ultimately are. They are the record of humans who noticed what they could do, and who wrote it down, and who left the writing behind, so that other humans, in later times, could read it, and could recognize themselves in it, and could continue doing the 11 things in their own specific finite ways. And this whole activity of noticing and writing and reading and recognizing and continuing is the ongoing work of the human species. And it is what the tablets, in the end, are for. And it is what you, sitting there, are for as well. And you are, right now, participating in it, whether you knew it or not, whether you meant to or not, whether you understand it fully or not. You are one of the humans, and the 11 abilities are in you, and they will be in you until the end. And after the end, someone will honor you with ritual, and the cycle will continue. And the tablets, if they could speak in their own voice, would tell you that this is the deepest and simplest truth about what you are. You are one of the beings who can do the 11 things, and in doing them, you become what you were always going to become. And that, according to the oldest scribes of the oldest cities of the ancient world, is enough. That is the whole point. That is what the tablets, 4,000 years ago, wrote down for you to eventually find, and to read, and to carry forward, in your own way, in your own finite time, for as long as your time lasts. There is a final passage in one of the wisdom tablets from Nippur that seems, in the light of everything we have discussed, like the appropriate place to leave off. The passage is short. It has been translated in various ways, but the most literal reading of the cuneiform runs something like this. The God who cannot die cannot know. The God who cannot forget cannot forgive. The God who cannot age cannot ripen. The God who cannot rebel cannot choose. The God who cannot sacrifice cannot love. The God who cannot hope cannot begin. The God who cannot grieve cannot honor. The God who cannot change cannot grow. The God who cannot love the mortal cannot know what love is for. The God who cannot deceive himself cannot dream. The God who cannot bury the dead cannot complete anything. And the God who cannot do any of these things is, though he does not know it, the poorest of all beings in the universe. And the mortal, who can do all 11, is, though she does not know it, the richest of all beings in the universe. And the tablets, in their final layers, were written to help the mortal know it. You know it now. Or at least, you have been told. What you do with the telling is, as we have said, up to you. You can put the video away and go back to your ordinary life without thinking about the 11 items again. You can let them settle into the back of your mind and let them shape your decisions in ways you do not consciously notice. You can make a habit of returning to them, checking your life against them, using them as a kind of diagnostic for whether you are living up to the specific capacities you have been given. Any of these responses is available. The 11 abilities, being what they are, do not force themselves on you. They wait for you to use them, and they will keep waiting, day by day, for as long as you continue to exist. The Sumerians, in their final centuries, seem to have known that their whole civilization was passing, and they wrote in some of the latest tablets, with a specific tone that is difficult to describe. It is not despair. It is not resignation. It is something closer to a calm acceptance that their specific finite civilization had done what it could, and that the 11 abilities would continue to operate in other civilizations, in other languages, in other cities, long after the Sumerian language had ceased to be spoken. And the calmness of the acceptance is, in its own way, one of the most beautiful features of the whole corpus. Because the Sumerians, at the end, were performing the 11th ability at the scale of their whole civilization. They were burying themselves, in effect, with ritual. They were writing the tablets that would be their grave goods. They were making the final marks that would preserve their identity across the millennia. And they were doing it calmly, because they knew, at some deep level, that the 11 abilities were not confined to their culture. They knew that any culture that came after them, if it was a human culture, would have the same 11 abilities available to it. And so their own ending was not the ending of the abilities. It was just the ending of one specific expression of the abilities. And the abilities themselves would continue in other bodies, in other languages, in other times. You are one of those other times. You are one of those other bodies. You are speaking or thinking in one of those other languages. And the 11 abilities are in you, right now, just as they were in the Sumerians, just as they will be in whoever comes after you when your own time has passed. And the tablets, if you take them seriously, are asking you to carry the abilities forward, to use them, to pass them on, in whatever way you can, to whoever comes next. That is the assignment. That is the meaning of the list. That is the final teaching of the oldest tablets we have. Use the 11 abilities. Pass them on. Do not let them lapse. Do not let them be forgotten. Do not let the record of what your kind can do be lost. Because if the record is lost, then the abilities themselves may lapse, and the universe will have lost something. And the gods, in the tablets, will have lost something. And you, having had the abilities and having failed to use them, will have missed the entire point of your specific finite existence. And this, the tablets suggest, would be a shame. Because the specific finite existence you have is the only one you get, and the 11 abilities are what it is for. And using them, well or poorly, is what the being of a human being consists in. There is nothing else. That is the whole story. That is what the tablets came to say. And that is what they, 4,000 years later, are still saying to whoever will listen. And now the video ends. Thank you for staying with it for 3 hours. The tablet references, if you want to look them up yourself, include the 12 tablets of the standard Babylonian recension of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Old Babylonian recension of the Atrahasis epic, the Enuma Elish in its various Akkadian recensions, the Sumerian mythological cycles, including Enki and Ninmah, Enki and the World Order, the Descent of Inanna, the Marriage of Dumuzi and Inanna, the Adapa myth, the Instructions of Shuruppak, the Sumerian King List, the Lament for Ur, the Lament for Nippur, the Lament for Uruk, and the fragments of the Barton Cylinder. All of these are available in modern scholarly editions and in various popular translations. The ancient astronaut readings of them are available in the works of the various writers in that tradition, most prominently Zecharia Sitchin, whose interpretations remain contested but whose framing has shaped the popular understanding of the material more than any other single figure. Read them for yourself, come to your own conclusions, and keep the 11 items in mind as you read, because they are there, in the tablets, waiting to be noticed. And once you have noticed them, you will find that the tablets look different than they did before you noticed. They will look, in a specific way, like documents addressed to you, because they were. They were addressed to whoever, in whatever future, would eventually pick them up and read them and find themselves in them. And you have now picked them up, and you have found yourself in them. And the transmission, 4,000 years after it was first inscribed in clay, has, in this moment, completed itself once again. Take a moment, before you move on to whatever comes next in your day, to sit with what you have heard. The 11 items are not a puzzle to be solved. They are a description of what you are. They are a diagnostic mirror. They show you, in specific terms, the shape of the being you are, as distinct from the shape of the beings your ancestors called gods. And this shape, in the Sumerian view, is not a lesser shape. It is a specific shape. It has its own dignity. It has its own reach. It has its own accomplishments available to it that no other shape in the universe can accomplish. And you are inside this shape, right now, listening to these words, thinking whatever you are thinking about them, and the shape is yours. And it is only yours for a specific finite amount of time. And what you do with that time is going to be your specific finite answer to the question the tablets asked 4,000 years ago. The question being, what will a mortal being do with the 11 abilities we have given it? Your answer, whatever it is being formed right now, and it will be your entire life, in the end, that stands as your answer. And the tablets, if they could see, would want your answer to be a full one. They would want you to have used the 11 abilities well. They would want your specific finite time to have counted. They would want you, at the end, to have done the things that only you could have done. That is what they were written for. That is what they hoped for. In whatever way an old clay tablet can be said to hope, and you are the recipient of that hope. Now, in this moment, in this specific finite moment that will not come again, so do something with it. Do something with it that you would be proud, at the end, to have done. Because the end will come sooner than you think, and the specific finite acts that stand between now and then are the only offering you have to make. Make them count. Make them yours. Make them the shape of a life that used the 11 abilities as fully as it could, and the tablets, in whatever quiet way, will register the offering. And so will you, and so will whoever loved you along the way. And that is the whole point. And that is where the tablet falls silent.